Hello? Perhaps you're lying in bed right now, the day finally quiet around you. Maybe you're searching for a moment of peace, or simply hoping your mind will slow down enough to let sleep arrive. Either way, welcome. This is a space for wondering together. Tonight, we're going to explore something you've almost certainly felt, that strange, unsettling moment when reality seems to stutter. When the present feels like a memory you can't quite place. When everything around you becomes suddenly, impossibly familiar, even though you know it's the first time. We call it déjà vu, French for already seen. But the name doesn't explain the strangeness, does it? That uncanny sensation that you've lived this exact moment before. That reality has somehow looped back on itself. What if these moments aren't just quirks of memory? What if they're something else entirely, glimpses behind the curtain of existence itself? Tonight, we'll hold that question gently, turning it like a prism, watching how the light catches different faces of possibility. No pressure to find answers, just an invitation to drift through mystery together. Here's something remarkable. Between 60 and 80% of people have experienced déjà vu at least once. This isn't a rare neurological oddity or cultural artifact. It transcends geography, language, era. Ancient Romans spoke of it. Medieval mystics recorded it. Your grandmother felt it. Your neighbor across the world knows exactly what you mean when you describe that eerie sensation. Scientists have traced the phenomenon to activity in the temporal lobes, those regions of the brain nestled near your temples, involved in memory processing and recognition. When researchers monitor brain activity during déjà vu experiences, they see specific neural patterns lighting up, electrical whispers passing between networks that handle memory and perception. Yet, knowing where it happens doesn't diminish the strangeness, does it? Understanding that your temporal lobes are misfiring doesn't make the experience feel less profound in the moment. If anything, the universality deepens the mystery. Why would evolution preserve this glitch across millions of years and billions of human experiences? What purpose does it serve, if any? Perhaps the wonder isn't in finding the answer. Perhaps it's in recognizing that this small shared strangeness connects you to something vast and human. Let's pause and examine what actually happens during déjà vu. You're in a moment, any moment. Sitting in a cafe, walking down a street, having a conversation. Suddenly, without warning, recognition floods through you. This has happened before. Every detail feels known. The angle of light, the precise words being spoken, the texture of air against your skin. But here's the fracture: you can't remember when it happened before. You're recognizing something without accessing a memory. The present collides with a phantom past that has no location in your actual history. Neuroscientists call this a mismatch between two processing systems. One system handles perception, the raw intake of sensory information. Another handles memory, storing and retrieving experiences. Usually they work in harmony, but sometimes the signals get crossed. Your perception system sends information forward, while your memory system simultaneously signals recognition, creating that impossible experience of remembering the present. It's an elegant malfunction, if you think about it. Your brain generating a feeling without the corresponding content, like hearing a song you've never heard, but somehow knowing all the notes before they arrive. And in that fracture, the question whispers, what else might be fractured that we don't notice? There's a thought experiment that's been gaining attention in recent years. What if reality itself is a simulation, an extraordinarily sophisticated program running on some inconceivably advanced computer? And what if déjà vu is a glitch in that program, a momentary hiccup when the simulation briefly repeats itself or fails to fully render a new experience? Now, before we go further, let's be clear, we're not claiming this is true. We're holding it as a possibility, a lens through which to view the mystery. After all, humans have always questioned the nature of reality. 2,400 years ago, Plato imagined prisoners in a cave, seeing only shadows, mistaking them for reality. Simulation hypothesis is simply the modern language for an ancient suspicion. Why does this metaphor feel so intuitive to many of us? Perhaps because we've grown up with digital technology. We understand glitches. We've seen video games freeze and stutter, rendering errors that reveal the code underneath the experience. When we encounter something inexplicable in our own consciousness, we reach for the metaphors available to us. Or perhaps there's another reason the metaphor resonates. Perhaps something in us recognizes, however dimly, that the texture of experience might be thinner than we assume. That reality might have seams. We tend to think of memory as a recording device, a camera capturing moments and storing them faithfully for later review. But memory is nothing like that. It's not a recording, it's a reconstruction. Every time you remember something, your brain is actively rebuilding that memory from scattered fragments stored across different neural networks. The hippocampus, that seahorse-shaped structure deep in your brain, works with the prefrontal cortex to weave together sensory details, emotions, and context. But here's what's extraordinary: the brain doesn't distinguish between remembering and imagining. The same neural machinery handles both processes, which means every memory is part fabrication, part truth, part creative storytelling. Elizabeth Loftus, a psychologist who has spent decades studying memory, demonstrated this beautifully. In her experiments, she showed how easy it is to implant false memories. She convinced people they'd been lost in a mall as children, an event that never happened. She altered subjects' memories of witnessing car accidents simply by changing the wording of questions asked afterward. The memory felt completely real to those experiencing it. They could recall details, emotions, the sensory texture of events that never occurred. Your brain is not a faithful historian. It's an artist, constantly painting the past with brushstrokes from the present. Every time you recall a memory, you subtly change it. You incorporate new information, current emotions, recent experiences. The you that existed 5 years ago is now accessible only through a memory reconstructed by the you that exists today. This unreliability isn't a flaw, it's a feature. A flexible memory system allows you to update your understanding, to learn from patterns, to imagine futures by recombining elements of the past. Your brain prioritizes usefulness over accuracy, meaning over literal truth. So when déjà vu strikes, when you feel you're remembering something that's actually happening for the first time, perhaps what you're experiencing is your brain's creative storytelling machinery spinning slightly out of sync, a memory being constructed in the wrong tense, the past and present temporarily tangled in the loom of consciousness. And if our memories are this beautifully unreliable, this fundamentally creative, what does that say about the nature of personal identity? You are, in many ways, a story your brain tells itself, a narrative woven from reconstructed memories, shifting with each telling. Remarkable, isn't it? The architecture that makes you you is also the architecture that might occasionally convince you that a brand new moment is an ancient memory returning. Some people experience déjà vu not as a rare oddity, but as a chronic condition. Patients with temporal lobe epilepsy often report intense, frequent déjà vu experiences, sometimes dozens of times a day. For them, the familiar but impossible feeling can last minutes rather than seconds, creating an almost dreamlike state where past and present seem to exist simultaneously. This connection between temporal lobe activity and déjà vu gave researchers a crucial clue. If epileptic activity in this brain region consistently produces the sensation, then perhaps déjà vu in healthy individuals represents a much subtler version of the same process, a tiny temporarily electrical storm in the neural networks responsible for memory and recognition. In the 1950s, a neurosurgeon named Wilder Penfield conducted remarkable experiments. During brain surgery on epileptic patients who remained conscious under local anesthesia, Penfield used electrical probes to stimulate different areas of the brain. He was mapping the terrain of consciousness, discovering which regions controlled which functions, When he stimulated certain areas of the temporal lobes, something extraordinary happened. Patients suddenly reported vivid experiences that felt like memories, but memories they couldn't place. One woman said she heard a song. A man insisted he was in his childhood home. These weren't vague feelings, they had the full sensory richness and emotional weight of genuine memories. But were they memories at all? Or was Penfield creating the sensation of remembering by directly activating the neural circuits involved in memory retrieval, generating the feeling without the corresponding actual past experience? Think about what this implies. The brain has the capacity to create absolute conviction that you're remembering something, independent of whether that something ever happened. The subjective experience of memory, that feeling of knowing you've experienced this before, can be conjured purely through the firing of specific neurons. Your sense of the past, in other words, is not guaranteed to correspond to actual history. It's a feeling generated by biological machinery that occasionally produces that feeling at the wrong time. This raises a beautiful question. How many of your memories are faithful reproductions of events? And how many are, to some degree, fabrications, convincing performances staged by your temporal lobes? You walk through life assuming a clear distinction between past and present, between memory and experience. But the temporal lobe theatre suggests those boundaries are more porous than they appear. The brain is constantly generating the sensation of time passing, a feeling of moving from known past into unknown future. Déjà vu might simply be the rare moment when you catch your brain in the act of this temporal sleight of hand. A backstage glimpse of the machinery that usually operates invisibly, seamlessly maintaining your sense of chronological flow, and perhaps, just perhaps, that glimpse reveals something profound about the nature of time itself. Let's go deeper into the mechanism. Cognitive psychologists have identified two distinct systems involved in remembering. One is called familiarity, a fast automatic sense that you've encountered something before. The other is recollection, a slower, more detailed process of actually retrieving the specific memory. When you see an old friend on the street, familiarity hits instantly. You know this person. A fraction of a second later, recollection follows. This is Sarah. You met in college. You studied together in the library during finals week. Two systems working in concert. So quickly you don't notice the gap between them. In the 1980s, researchers Larry Jacoby and Marcia Dallas conducted elegant experiments demonstrating this dual process theory. They showed subjects lists of words, then later tested recognition. Sometimes people correctly identified words from the list, but couldn't remember seeing them. They had familiarity without recollection. Other times people confidently recalled seeing words that hadn't actually been on the list. They had constructed false recollection without genuine familiarity. The systems can operate independently, and when they desynchronize, strange experiences emerge. Déjà vu appears to be familiarity firing without recollection. Your familiarity system signals, yes, this has happened before, but your recollection system has nothing to offer. No actual memory surfaces. You're left with pure recognition divorced from any remembered context, a feeling without content. It's like experiencing the emotion of nostalgia without being able to identify what you're nostalgic for, or feeling you've forgotten something important without knowing what that something is. The sensation is genuine and powerful, but it points to nothing. From an evolutionary perspective, this split makes sense. Familiarity needs to be fast. It helps you quickly categorize experiences as safe or dangerous, known or unknown. Recollection can be slower, filling in details after the initial assessment. Usually this division of labor works beautifully, but occasionally the familiarity system misfires, creating recognition without a corresponding memory to justify it. What's fascinating is how convinced you become during déjà vu. Even knowing it's likely a neural glitch doesn't diminish the overwhelming sense of recognition in the moment. The familiarity system's signal is so strong, so undeniable, that it temporarily overrides logic. You know you've been here before, even as another part of your mind insists it's impossible. This speaks to how much of consciousness is feeling rather than fact. The qualitative texture of experience, the felt sense of knowing, of remembering, of being certain, can exist independent of actual truth. Your brain generates these feelings, and you experience them as real, because in a sense they are. They're real feelings, even when they're about unreal memories. So déjà vu becomes a kind of mirror. It reflects back the strange truth that much of your mental life is your brain generating sensations and narratives that you then experience as direct perception of reality. The feeling of knowing, the sensation of remembering, the sense of continuity across time, all of these are constructions, useful, mostly accurate constructions, but constructions nonetheless. And in those rare moments when the construction glitches, when familiarity and recollection fall out of sync, you catch a glimpse of the machinery at work, the elegant, occasionally fallible system that creates your sense of having a past, a present, and a coherent self moving through time. Now let's consider a different angle on memory's architecture. Some neuroscientists have proposed that memory might work holographically, that each fragment contains information about the whole, distributed across neural networks rather than stored in discrete locations. Carl Pribram, a neuroscientist who pioneered this idea, drew inspiration from optical holograms. If you shatter a holographic plate and shine light through any fragment, you still see the complete image, just at lower resolution. The information isn't localized, it's distributed throughout. Pribram suggested something similar might be happening in your brain. When you remember your childhood kitchen, that memory isn't stored in one specific cluster of neurons. Instead, the pattern is distributed across vast networks. Any fragment of the network can, in theory, reconstruct aspects of the whole memory. This helps explain why brain damage doesn't erase specific memories. People might lose overall memory capacity, but they don't typically lose only memories of Tuesdays or only memories involving the color blue. Memories degrade generally rather than selectively, suggesting they're spread throughout the system rather than filed in neat categorical boxes. From this perspective, déjà vu might occur when a current experience activates a distributed memory pattern that resembles, but doesn't quite match, patterns from past experiences. Your brain recognizes the similarity at a holistic level without being able to pinpoint which specific memory is being echoed. You feel recognition because the overall pattern resonates with stored patterns, but you can't recall a specific instance because no exact match exists. It's like hearing a chord progression that feels familiar without being able to name the song. The components resonate with your stored musical knowledge, creating a sense of recognition that isn't attached to a particular memory. This holographic model also connects intriguingly to the simulation hypothesis we touched on earlier. If consciousness is somehow substrate independent, if it's more about information patterns than specific biological hardware, then perhaps the distinction between real memories and simulated ones becomes less meaningful. A holographic memory system is, in a sense, already a simulation. It's not storing actual past experiences, but rather encoding patterns that can be reconstructed. Every memory you access is a new simulation based on stored data, not a replay of the original event. So when you experience déjà vu, maybe you're experiencing a moment when your internal simulation briefly runs the same pattern twice, or when two subtly different patterns overlap, creating interference, like two holographic images projected onto the same space, both visible, both real in their way, neither quite solid. The beauty of the holographic hypothesis is that it suggests memory is inherently more fluid, more distributed, more interconnected than linear models implied. You're not a library of discrete files, but a dynamic network where everything touches everything else, where past experiences blend and inform each other, where the boundaries between one memory and another are soft and negotiable. And in that fluid, interconnected space, it's no wonder that occasionally signals cross, patterns echo unexpectedly, and you find yourself recognizing something that you simultaneously know you've never experienced. The holographic brain, constantly reconstructing reality from distributed patterns, weaving past and present into a seamless narrative, occasionally revealing through glitches like déjà vu the extraordinary complexity of the system that makes you possible. A complexity that might be mirrored in reality itself if reality too is information holographically encoded, patterns within patterns, simulations rendering simulations, all the way down. Let's talk about time itself, or rather about the peculiar way your brain constructs your experience of time. There's something remarkable that neuroscientists discovered: your conscious awareness is always running about 80 milliseconds behind reality. Your brain needs time to process sensory information, to integrate inputs from different senses, to construct the coherent experience you think of as now. Benjamin Libet, a researcher who studied the timing of consciousness, conducted famous experiments in the 1980s. He asked subjects to note the precise moment they decided to flex their wrist, while simultaneously measuring their brain activity. What he found was startling. The brain showed readiness to move several hundred milliseconds before subjects reported deciding to move. Your brain acts before you consciously decide to act. Then it constructs the experience of deciding, backdating your sense of agency so it feels like you chose in the moment. In other words, the present moment you're experiencing right now is actually a very recent memory. Your brain presents it to you as now, but it's already passed by the time you're aware of it. Consciousness is always looking at the past, mistaking it for the present. This has profound implications for déjà vu. If every moment of awareness is already technically a memory, a reconstruction of something that happened milliseconds ago, then the line between present and past becomes beautifully blurred. Your entire life is experienced in a permanent state of minuscule delay, your consciousness forever chasing reality slightly behind schedule. Maybe déjà vu occurs when this delay becomes momentarily visible, when the mechanism that usually seamlessly converts immediate past into experienced present stutters, and you catch your brain in the act of presenting a memory as if it's happening now, because that's what it's always doing. Déjà vu might just be the rare occasion when the illusion breaks down enough for you to notice. Time, as you experience it, is not objective reality flowing uniformly forward. It's a construction. Your brain takes disparate sensory inputs arriving at different speeds, light traveling faster than sound, touch processed faster than sight, and weaves them into a unified timeline. It creates the sensation of smooth, continuous flow from moment to moment, but that flow is an interpretation, a narrative your brain tells. And occasionally, the storyteller stumbles. Think about other temporal oddities you've experienced. Time flying when you're engaged, crawling when you're bored. The way an event can seem to last forever in the moment, but compress to nothing in memory. Or vice versa. The strange elasticity of duration under different circumstances. Your brain is constantly negotiating time, adjusting your perception to create functional coherence. Usually this works so well you don't notice it's happening, but déjà vu might be a reminder that time as you experience it is more fluid, more constructed, more subject to glitches than you typically assume. Some physicists argue that time itself might be an illusion, that at the deepest level of reality, past, present, and future exist simultaneously. The flow of time, in this view, is a feature of consciousness, not of the universe itself. If that's true, then your brain's time construction machinery isn't just creating your subjective experience of temporal flow. It might be participating in creating time itself, at least as it exists for conscious beings, and déjà vu becomes even stranger. Not just a glitch in your perception of time, but perhaps a moment when the constructed nature of time becomes briefly visible, when the smooth narrative breaks down, and you experience just for a moment the underlying timelessness, past and present collapsing into a single point of recognition, without chronology. The present is always already past. Every now is already then by the time you know it, and in that slippage, in that infinitesimal delay, where your brain is constantly translating reality into experience, lies perhaps the space where déjà vu emerges, time stuttering, reality briefly repeating, or maybe just the eternal present momentarily visible beneath the narrative of time's arrow. Your brain is fundamentally a prediction machine. Every moment, it's not merely processing what's happening, it's forecasting what will happen next. This predictive processing is essential for survival. When you catch a ball, you're not reacting to where the ball is, but to where your brain predicts it will be. When you have a conversation, you're anticipating the next words before they're spoken. Your entire experience of reality is slightly ahead of itself, your brain constantly running simulations of the immediate future. Neuroscientists call this the predictive coding framework. Your brain maintains internal models of the world and generates predictions based on those models. Sensory information arriving from outside is compared against predictions. When there's a match, the brain essentially says, "Yes, as expected, move along." When there's a mismatch, a prediction error, the brain updates its models and pays attention. Most of what you perceive is actually prediction. The raw sensory data is sparse and ambiguous. Your brain fills in enormous amounts of detail based on past experience and context. The stable, coherent world you seem to perceive directly is largely simulation, your brain's best guess about what's out there. This explains many perceptual phenomena. Why you can read text with scrambled internal letters as long as the first and last are correct. Why you don't notice obvious changes in images if they occur during a blink or eye movement. Your brain is showing you its predictions more than raw reality. So where does déjà vu fit into this predictive architecture? One intriguing possibility, déjà vu might occur when your brain's prediction is so accurate that it matches the incoming experience almost perfectly. But the brain doesn't recognize the match as its own prediction. Instead, it interprets the match as recognition from past experience. In other words, your brain predicted this moment with unusual precision. The prediction was so good that when reality matched it, the matching felt like memory rather than foresight. You've seen this before, but before was actually a split second ago when your brain generated the prediction. The prediction system and the memory system, in this scenario, become temporarily confused. A forecast gets mistaken for a recollection, future-looking machinery accidentally labeled as past referencing. It's an elegant hypothesis, because it fits with what we know about how prediction and memory use overlapping neural architecture. The same brain regions involved in imagining future scenarios are involved in remembering past ones. The cognitive machinery for mentally simulating events is shared across past and future. From the brain's perspective, remembering and imagining aren't fundamentally different operations. Both involve constructing scenarios from stored information. Both involve mentally seeing something not currently present. The primary difference is the temporal tag attached. This mental simulation is about the past, that one about the future. And if the tagging system glitches, you might experience a prediction as a memory. The future temporarily labeled as the past. This transforms how we think about déjà vu. Rather than a malfunction in memory retrieval, it's a category error in temporal labeling. Your prediction machinery working so well, it creates an experience of recognition. You are always living slightly in the future, your brain's simulations running ahead of reality, and most of the time, this forward-looking perspective is invisible to you. You experience it as simply perceiving the present, but occasionally, perhaps, the mechanism becomes visible. The prediction is precise enough, and the labeling confused enough, that you catch yourself experiencing your own forecast as if it were a memory. The paradox is beautiful. Déjà vu might be your brain being too good at its job. Prediction so accurate it feels like memory. The future so clearly seen it becomes the past. And in that paradox, we find a strange kind of comfort. Your brain is extraordinary at modeling reality, so skilled at forecasting the flow of events that occasionally it creates the experience of having already lived a moment that's unfolding for the first time. You are a prediction engine, wrapped in consciousness, forever slightly ahead of reality, occasionally catching a glimpse of the machinery that allows you to navigate time. Before we dive deeper into speculation, let's establish what we mean by glitch. The term comes from electronics, the sudden electrical surge or malfunction. In Yiddish, glitch means a slip or slide. It entered popular consciousness through space programs, where engineers used it to describe brief, unexplained irregularities in systems, but glitches became culturally iconic through digital technology. We've all seen them: video game characters walking through walls, images corrupting into geometric chaos, sounds distorting into stuttering loops. A glitch reveals what usually remains hidden: the underlying code, the constructed nature of what seems solid. When a video game glitches, you suddenly see through the illusion. The seamless fantasy world reveals itself as polygons and textures, rendering at different rates, subject to computational shortcuts. The magic breaks, and you glimpse the machinery. Glitches are accidents that illuminate architecture. They're unintended revelations, moments when a system's invisible scaffolding becomes momentarily visible. Think about the famous green code from the Matrix, cascading symbols that represent the hidden programming of simulated reality. Or Missing No, the glitch Pokemon that appeared when players exploited programming errors, an entity that shouldn't exist within the game's intended logic, but emerged from the cracks in the code. There's something almost holy about glitches in digital culture. They're treated as Easter eggs, secrets, glimpses behind the veil, the documentation of the imperfection that proves construction. If something can glitch, it was made. If it was made, it has makers. So when we ask whether déjà vu might be a glitch, we're asking, does this strange experience reveal underlying architecture? Does the moment when consciousness hiccups tell us something about the nature of consciousness itself, or even the nature of reality? In video games, glitches often occur at boundaries, where one rendered area meets another, where systems interface imperfectly. They happen at loading points, transitions, moments when the computational burden is highest. Déjà vu in this metaphor might be a boundary phenomenon. Perhaps it occurs at the transition between immediate perception and memory consolidation, or at the intersection of prediction and experience, or when attention shifts between internal and external processing. The glitch happens at the seam, and if reality itself has seams, if it's constructed rather than fundamental, then perhaps the seams become visible during anomalies like déjà vu. This doesn't require believing we're in a simulation. Even if reality is entirely physical, consciousness still involves representations, models, processing. Your experience of reality is mediated by neural architecture that constructs your phenomenal world. That construction has seams, inefficiencies, potential failure points. Déjà vu as glitch means treating the experience as diagnostic. Rather than dismissing it as meaningless error, we examine it for what it reveals about the system it emerged from. What does it tell us? That consciousness can generate powerful recognition without corresponding memory, that temporal experience can stutter and loop, that the distinction between past and present can momentarily collapse. It tells us that these categories, past, present, memory, perception, are not fundamental features of reality, but rather organizational principles. Your brain imposes on raw experience, and organizational principles can fail. The categories can blur. The system that maintains boundaries can glitch. So whether the simulation is happening in neurons or in some hypothetical computer beyond our universe, the glitch metaphor is useful. It frames déjà vu not as random noise but as meaningful disruption, a crack in the construction through which we might glimpse whatever lies underneath. And that glimpse, however brief and ambiguous, invites wonder. What else might glitch? What other aspects of experience might reveal themselves as constructed rather than given? How much of what you take for reality is actually representation, simulation, provisional model? The glitch doesn't answer, it only asks, and in that asking lies an invitation to see the familiar world as strainer, more mysterious, more contingent than it appears. Now we turn to the simulation hypothesis itself, not as belief but as thought experiment, a lens through which to examine déjà vu from a different angle. In 2003, philosopher Nick Bostrom published a paper titled, "Are You Living in a Computer Simulation?" The paper presented what's become known as the simulation trilemma. Three possibilities, at least one of which must be true. First possibility, civilizations like ours almost always go extinct before reaching the technological capability to run sophisticated simulations of conscious beings. Maybe nuclear war, climate collapse, or some other catastrophe prevents technological maturity. Second possibility, advanced civilizations could run such simulations, but choose not to. Perhaps ethical considerations prevent them. Perhaps they lose interest. Perhaps simulating conscious beings is taboo in advanced societies. Third possibility, we are almost certainly living in a simulation right now. Bostrom's argument is probabilistic, not definitive. If civilizations regularly reach the capability to run many ancestor simulations, virtual realities populated by conscious beings unaware they're simulated, then the number of simulated consciousnesses would vastly outnumber original, non-simulated ones. Think of it this way. Imagine one original civilization running 1,000,000 simulations, each containing billions of conscious entities. The ratio of simulated to real becomes astronomically large. If you're randomly selected from all conscious beings across real and simulated realities, odds are overwhelming you'd be simulated. This isn't proof. It's probability conditional on assumptions, but it's a philosophically rigorous framework for taking the question seriously. What does this have to do with déjà vu? If we're in a simulation, computational efficiency becomes important. Running a perfect, quantum-accurate simulation of an entire universe would require extraordinary resources. Corners might be cut, systems might prioritize efficiency over flawlessness, and just like video games, a simulated reality might occasionally glitch, especially at moments of high computational load or at boundaries between rendered areas. Déjà vu could be one such glitch, a moment when the system briefly repeats code, or when two slightly different simulation branches momentarily overlap, or when memory gets incorrectly indexed. Now it's crucial to say this is speculation, not science. The simulation hypothesis, as currently formulated, makes no testable predictions. It's philosophy at the boundary of metaphysics and science fiction, but it's philosophically interesting precisely because it reframes ancient questions. Plato's cave allegory, Hindu concepts of Maya, the illusory nature of reality, Buddhist ideas about the constructed nature of self. These traditions have long suggested that what we perceive as reality might be layers removed from ultimate truth. Simulation hypothesis is the contemporary expression of this perennial suspicion. We use computational metaphors because we live in a computational age, but the underlying question is timeless. Is the reality we experience the deepest level of reality, or is it representation, appearance, shadow? And if it's representation, what happens at the boundaries? What happens when the representation stutters? Bostrom himself notes that even if we're simulated, it doesn't necessarily change how we should live. The experience is still real to us. Suffering still matters. Choices still have consequences within the simulation. But psychologically, emotionally, the idea resonates with many people. Perhaps because modern life increasingly feels mediated, virtual, one step removed. We spend hours daily looking at screens, interacting through digital representations, living partially in virtual spaces, or perhaps the simulation hypothesis resonates because it offers a framework for experiences that otherwise feel inexplicable. Déjà vu, synchronicities, moments when reality feels scripted or too coincidental. The simulation metaphor provides a vocabulary for the uncanny. We're not claiming déjà vu proves we're simulated. We're suggesting that the simulation framework offers an interesting perspective on consciousness anomalies, A way of asking what would it mean if the architecture of reality were computational, and might experiences like déjà vu be precisely what we'd expect from computational architecture, occasionally revealing itself. The question remains open, the wonder remains intact, and the glitch, whether neural or digital, invites us to look more closely at the nature of the reality we inhabit. Let's explore a related idea: substrate independence. The notion that consciousness might not depend on biology specifically, but rather on information patterns that could, in principle, exist on any sufficiently complex substrate. Hans Moravec and Ray Kurzweil have written extensively about mind uploading, the theoretical possibility of transferring human consciousness to non-biological hardware. The idea is that if consciousness is essentially information processing, patterns of data and relationships, then the biological neurons currently host in your mind might not be fundamentally necessary. A sufficiently detailed scan of your brain structure down to the synaptic connections and neurochemical states could theoretically be used to create a functionally identical system in silicon. And if that system ran the same information processing patterns, would it have your experiences? Would it be you? This is deeply controversial. Some philosophers and neuroscientists argue consciousness is inextricably tied to biological processes, that there's something about organic chemistry that makes experience possible. Others argue for functionalism. If the functional relationships are preserved, consciousness emerges regardless of substrate. We can't resolve this debate tonight, but let's follow the logic. If consciousness is substrate independent, then the distinction between real and simulated consciousness becomes questionable. A consciousness running on silicon would be just as real, just as genuinely experiencing, as one running on neurons. And if that's possible, then perhaps consciousness already is, in some sense, a simulation. Even in biological brains, you're not directly experiencing reality. You're experiencing a model of reality constructed by neural processing. You're experiencing representations, data structures, information patterns, not the underlying physical world directly. So the question, are we in a simulation, might have a surprising answer. We're always in a simulation, the simulation generated by our own brains, translating electromagnetic waves into colors, air vibrations into sounds, chemical interactions into tastes and smells. Your lived experience is already one step removed from physical reality. It's a rendered version, a virtual reality generated by 3 pounds of neural tissue, creating the convincing illusion that you're directly experiencing the world. Déjà vu, from this perspective, is a glitch in the brain simulation, a moment when the rendering becomes inconsistent, when the virtual reality generator produces an anomaly that breaks immersion. But here's where it gets even stranger. If a biological brain can generate consciousness through information processing, and if that information processing could theoretically run on other substrates, then what prevents nested simulations? A brain creates consciousness. That consciousness exists within the physical universe. But could an advanced civilization within that physical universe create simulations containing conscious beings? And could those simulated conscious beings, if they develop sufficient technology, create their own simulations? You might be in a simulation dreaming you're physical, and within your own dreams you might someday create simulations containing beings who think they're physical. Reality potentially consists of nested layers, each one simulating the next. Consciousnesses within consciousnesses, interpretations. The Russian doll structure of it all is dizzying, and perhaps that dizziness is itself revealing, showing the limitations of trying to think about consciousness from within consciousness, like an eye trying to see itself. We can't step outside experience to verify what experience is. We can't examine consciousness from a non-conscious perspective. We're trapped inside the very phenomenon we are trying to understand. So maybe déjà vu is a reminder of this irreducible strangeness. A moment when the simulation, whether neural or computational, acknowledges its own constructedness. A loop in the system that points back at itself, creating the uncanny sensation of recursive recognition. You recognizing yourself. Recognizing yourself. Experience. 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 The simulation becoming momentarily self-aware, creating in that moment of self-awareness the vertigo of infinite regress. And perhaps that vertigo is the closest we can come to truth. Not an answer, but an experience of the question's depth. Not certainty, but a beautiful, dizzying uncertainty that honors the mystery of consciousness itself. Let's think practically about simulations. If you were designing a simulated universe, what challenges would you face? Computational resources, for one. Even with inconceivably advanced technology, simulating every particle in a universe at the quantum level would require vast processing power. So you'd need efficiency strategies, shortcuts, ways to reduce the computational burden without breaking the illusion for conscious inhabitants. Video game designers solve this with selective rendering. The game doesn't compute what's not being observed. When you turn around in a game world, the area behind you essentially ceases to exist in detail until you look again. Objects in the distance are rendered at lower resolution. Physical interactions are simplified for anything the player isn't directly engaging with. This is why video games glitch predictably at certain moments, when you move too quickly for the rendering system to keep up, or when you reach the edges of loaded areas, or when you exploit mechanics in ways the designers didn't anticipate. Could reality use similar strategies? Quantum mechanics seems to suggest something along these lines. The observer effect, the famous principle that particles exist in probabilistic states until measured, could be interpreted as a kind of selective rendering. Reality becomes concrete when observed, remaining probabilistic and less computationally expensive when not. The double-slit experiment demonstrates this elegantly. A photon behaves as a wave of probability until observed, then collapses into a specific location. It's as if reality renders detail only when consciousness is looking, maintaining efficiency by keeping unobserved regions in lower resolution probability states. Now, this interpretation is controversial among physicists. Most would say quantum mechanics describes reality's fundamental nature, not computational shortcuts, but the metaphor is intriguing, and if reality does use efficiency strategies, then glitches become more likely. Déjà vu could be what happens when the system briefly renders the same moment twice, like a loading screen hiccup where the previous frame lingers while the new one loads. Or it could be a caching error. Computer systems often store recently accessed information in quick access memory to improve performance. Maybe consciousness uses similar strategies, and déjà vu occurs when the cache gets confused with real-time experience. Or consider procedural generation, the technique games use to create vast worlds from relatively simple algorithms. No Man's Sky, for instance, generates billions of unique planets using mathematical formulas rather than individually designing each one. The planets are computed as players visit them. Could reality be procedurally generated? Your life unfolding according to algorithms that create the illusion of continuous existence while actually computing moment by moment. And might déjà vu happen when the generation algorithm briefly repeats a pattern or encounters an edge case it's not optimized for? This is playful speculation, of course. We're not making claims. We're using computational metaphors to explore the strangeness of consciousness anomalies. But there's something useful in thinking about experience as rendered rather than given. It highlights the mediated nature of consciousness. You never experience reality directly. You experience your brain's interpretation, its rendering of sensory information into the coherent phenomenal world you inhabit. And that rendering system has limits. Optical illusions reveal how vision takes shortcuts, making assumptions that can be exploited. Change blindness shows how much we fail to notice, how selective attention and memory create the illusion of continuous perception when actually we're sampling fragments and filling in the rest. Your experience of reality is more like a video game than you might assume. not in the sense of being less real, but in the sense of being constructed, selective, optimized for function, rather than comprehensive accuracy. So when déjà vu occurs, we might think of it as the rendering system becoming momentarily visible, the usually seamless construction of experience revealing a scene, a loading screen in consciousness. Whether that loading screen exists in neural networks or in some hypothetical computer beyond the universe might not matter, as much as recognizing that consciousness is, fundamentally, a construction, an extraordinarily sophisticated, usually flawless construction that occasionally reveals its own constructedness. And in those revelations we find not disappointment that experience is rendered rather than direct, but wonder at the engineering that makes the rendering so convincing, so seamless, so beautifully, imperfectly, mysteriously real. Let's drift into even stranger territory, the quantum realm, where reality itself becomes probabilistic and observer-dependent. Quantum mechanics, one of the most successful scientific theories ever developed, describes a world profoundly different from everyday experience. At the smallest scales, particles don't have definite properties until measured. They exist in superposition, simultaneously in multiple states, until observation collapses the probability wave into a single outcome. The famous double-slit experiment demonstrates this. Fire photons one at a time at a barrier with 2 slits. If you don't measure which slit the photon passes through, it creates an interference pattern on the detector screen. A pattern that only makes sense if each individual photon somehow goes through both slits simultaneously and interferes with itself. But if you measure which slit the photon passes through, the interference pattern disappears. The photon behaves like a particle, going through one slit or the other, not both. The act of observation changes the outcome. Consciousness, or at least measurement, appears to play a fundamental role in determining reality. What does this have to do with déjà vu? Perhaps nothing, perhaps everything. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that reality branches at every quantum decision point. The many worlds interpretation proposes that all possible outcomes actually occur, each in its own parallel universe. When you measure a quantum state, you don't collapse the wave function, you split into multiple versions, each experiencing a different outcome. From this perspective, there are countless versions of you, each having experienced slightly different histories based on different quantum outcomes, and perhaps, just perhaps, déjà vu is a moment when somehow you experience an echo from a parallel timeline, when quantum probability briefly bleeds through, giving you access to a memory that belongs to a slightly different version of yourself in a slightly different universe. This is highly speculative. There's no evidence for communication between quantum branches. The many worlds interpretation, while mathematically coherent, is philosophically controversial and likely unfalsifiable. But as a thought experiment, it's captivating. What if déjà vu represents quantum decoherence, the process where superposed states separate into distinct outcomes, becoming momentarily imperfect? What if, for a brief moment, your consciousness experiences 2 quantum branches simultaneously, creating the sensation of having lived this moment in 2 slightly different ways? Another quantum phenomenon worth considering: entanglement. When particles become entangled, measuring one instantly affects the other, regardless of distance. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. It seems to violate the principle that information can't travel faster than light. Could consciousness involve quantum entanglement? Some researchers, like Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, have proposed that quantum processes in brain microtubules might be essential to consciousness. This is fringe science, highly contested, but intriguing. If consciousness has quantum properties, then perhaps it's subject to quantum anomalies, entanglement with your own past states, quantum tunneling through time, superposition of experiential states. Déjà vu might be a quantum event, a moment when the probabilistic nature of reality becomes experientially apparent, when the usually hidden quantum substrate briefly surfaces in conscious awareness, or perhaps the observer effect itself creates déjà vu. If observation collapses probability into actuality, but there's a delay or duplication in the observation process, you might experience the collapse twice, once when it happens, once when you become aware it happened. The same quantum event entering consciousness through two slightly different pathways, creating the sensation of repetition. These ideas push against the boundaries of current understanding. They mix confirmed physics with wild speculation, but that's appropriate for our contemplative journey tonight. We're not seeking answers so much as exploring the space of possibilities. Quantum mechanics already tells us that reality at its deepest level is far stranger than everyday experience suggests. Particles in multiple places, simultaneously, information connecting across space, measurement, creating reality. If the foundations are this weird, why should consciousness be straightforward? Why shouldn't our experience occasionally reveal the quantum strangeness underlying everything? Déjà vu as quantum glitch, a moment when Heisenberg's uncertainty bleeds into experience, when Schrödinger's cat briefly exists as both memory and present, when the wave function of consciousness collapses twice in the same moment. The mystery deepens rather than resolves, and in that deepening, we find a strange comfort. The universe is under no obligation to make sense to us. Reality can be precisely as strange as it is, no stranger, no simpler. And you, reading this, experiencing consciousness from inside consciousness, navigating a quantum reality rendered by neural networks into the seamless illusion of solid continuous existence, you are the perfect expression of the mystery itself. Before we leave this chapter, let's consider a related phenomenon that's captivated internet culture: the Mandela effect. The term comes from a specific false memory. Many people distinctly remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s. They recall news coverage, mourning, even details of his death. But Mandela was actually released from prison in 1990 and died in... This isn't one person misremembering, it's a collective false memory, shared by thousands of people who insist they remember something that didn't happen. Similar examples have proliferated online. The children's book series Berenstain Bears, or Berenstain Bears. Many people clearly remember the latter, but it's always been Berenstain, the Monopoly man. Does he have a monocle? Many insist yes, but he never has. The line from Star Wars: Luke, I am your father, or no, I am your father. The actual line is the latter, but the former is how most people remember it. These collective false memories have sparked wild speculation. Are they evidence of timeline shifts, parallel universes momentarily merging, simulation glitches affecting multiple people simultaneously? The mundane explanation is social contagion and memory reconstruction. One person misremembers, shares their false memory. Others find it plausible and incorporate it into their own memories. The false memory spreads like a meme, reinforced by social confirmation. This explanation is probably correct. Memory is reconstructive, suggestible, vulnerable to social influence. Elizabeth Loftus's research, which we discussed earlier, demonstrates how easily false memories can be implanted and reinforced. But let's play with the alternative, not as belief but as imaginative exploration. What if the Mandela effect points to something stranger? If we're in a simulation, mass glitches affecting many people simultaneously would be possible. Perhaps the simulation occasionally updates, changing past details, and most people's memories update seamlessly, but some retain fragments of the previous version, creating the Mandela effect. Or perhaps multiple timeline branches occasionally merge, and people from different branches bring different memories of history. Most memories align with the dominant timeline, but some people retain recollections from the minority timeline. Or quantum superposition, the macro-scale reality existing in multiple states simultaneously, until observed and different observers collapsing probability differently, creating multiple legitimate histories that somehow coexist. These explanations require abandoning well-established science. They're not plausible in any conventional sense, but as thought experiments, they're fascinating because they force us to question assumptions. We assume shared objective history. We assume memory, however flawed individually, converges on truth collectively. We assume the past is fixed, singular, and consistent. But what if memory creates history as much as reflects it? What if the past is more fluid than we assume, constantly reconstructed in the present, subtly different for each observer? The Mandela effect, whether caused by simple social contagion or something stranger, connects to déjà vu in an interesting way. Both involve memory disagreeing with expected reality. In déjà vu, your memory claims recognition where none should exist. In the Mandela effect, collective memory claims a past that doesn't match evidence. Both are about the tension between subjective experience and objective reality. Both raise questions about whose version of events takes precedence when personal experience conflicts with external evidence, and both create community. There's something oddly comforting about discovering others share your strange experience. Online forums dedicated to déjà vu and the Mandela effect are filled with people finding validation in shared anomaly. Maybe that's the real value of these phenomena. Not as evidence of simulation or parallel timelines, but as reminders that consciousness is stranger than we typically acknowledge, that memory is creative rather than archival, that reality as experienced is subjective, constructed, and beautifully unreliable. We live together in a shared world, but we each experience that world through the filter of our own consciousness, and occasionally the filters glitch in interestingly similar ways, creating collective anomalies that remind us of the mysterious gap between reality and experience. So whether you remember Bernstein or Bernstein, whether déjà vu feels like memory or prophecy, you're participating in the grand mystery of consciousness trying to make sense of itself. And that participation is real, whatever reality turns out to be. The simulation hypothesis feels modern, technological, distinctly 21st century. But humans have been questioning reality's authenticity for millennia. 2,400 years ago, in ancient Athens, Plato told the allegory of the cave. Imagine prisoners chained since childhood, facing a cave wall. Behind them burns a fire, and between the fire and prisoners, people carry objects that cast shadows on the wall. The prisoners see only shadows, they know nothing else. To them, the shadows are reality. Now imagine one prisoner is freed. He turns and sees the fire, the objects, the people. The shadows are revealed as projections. But this is disorienting, painful. The fire hurts his eyes. He struggles to understand that what he thought was real was merely representation. If he's dragged out of the cave entirely, into sunlight, the pain intensifies. But gradually his eyes adjust. He sees the actual world, trees, mountains, sky. He realizes the cave was just a dim copy of true reality. Plato intended this as metaphor for philosophy, how most people live, accepting surface appearances while philosophers seek deeper truth. But read today, it's eerily similar to simulation hypothesis. We might be like the cave prisoners, mistaking shadows, simulated reality, for the true world beyond. Plato believed material reality itself was a shadow. Somewhere beyond physical existence, he proposed, was a realm of perfect forms, pure, eternal, abstract templates of which physical objects are imperfect copies. The chair you're sitting in is a flawed imitation of the perfect form of chairness. This sounds strange to modern ears, but it's addressing the same question simulation hypothesis addresses. Is the reality we experience fundamental, or is it derivative, a copy of something more real? Buddhist philosophy offers another ancient parallel, Maya illusion. The phenomenal world in Buddhist thought is not ultimately real. It's a veil obscuring true nature. Attachment to the illusion causes suffering. Enlightenment involves seeing through Maya to the deeper truth, Different Buddhist schools interpret this differently. Some say the physical world literally doesn't exist. Others say it exists but not as we perceive it. Our perception is distorted by ignorance and craving, creating illusion, but the core insight is that experienced reality is mediated, constructed, not direct contact with ultimate truth. Hindu Vedanta philosophy goes further. Brahman, the ultimate reality, is singular and unchanging. The multiplicity of the world, all distinct objects and beings, is illusory projection. You, me, the stars, the earth, all temporary manifestations of one underlying consciousness, experiencing itself through infinite perspectives. In this view, you're already in a simulation. The simulation of separateness, of distinct selfhood, projected by universal consciousness playing a cosmic game of hide and seek with itself. Descartes, in the 17th century, imagined an evil demon powerful enough to deceive him about everything. Maybe all his perceptions were false, planted by this demon. How could he know? His famous conclusion, I think, therefore I am. The only certainty is that something is thinking these thoughts, even if everything else is deception. Simulation hypothesis is Descartes' demon updated with computer metaphors. Same question, different language, and no better answer. We're still left with cogito ergo sum, I think. Therefore something is happening, even if I can't prove what. These ancient and early modern philosophers weren't naive. They were deeply sophisticated thinkers who recognized that consciousness creates an insurmountable epistemological problem. You can't step outside consciousness to verify what consciousness is showing you. You can't see reality unmediated, because the seeing is itself mediation. So simulation hypothesis isn't new. It's the latest version of a perennial philosophical problem, and déjà vu fits beautifully into this tradition. A moment when the illusion becomes momentarily obvious, when the shadow is revealed as shadow, when Maya flickers and shows its constructedness. You're participating in an ancient conversation tonight, lying in darkness, wondering if experience is real. You join Plato in his cave, Buddhist monks in meditation, Descartes in his study, countless humans across time who felt the strange suspicion that reality might be something other than it appears. The question persists because it's unanswerable from within experience. But the questioning itself is valuable. It cultivates humility, wonder, openness to mystery. It softens certainty and creates space for deeper curiosity. And perhaps that's the real insight. Not whether we're simulated, but recognizing that reality as experienced is always already mediated, always filtered through consciousness, always, in some sense, simulated by the brain or projected by awareness. The cave shadows dance, the simulation runs, Maya shimmers, and you, experiencing all of this, are somehow both the prisoner and the light that casts the shadows, both the simulation and the consciousness running it, the paradox at the heart of everything. Let's follow the logic of simulation further, into vertigo. If a civilization becomes advanced enough to create simulated universes populated with conscious beings, they probably create many such simulations. Not just one, perhaps thousands, millions, each running different scenarios, exploring different parameters. And here's where it gets interesting. The simulated beings within those universes might also develop civilization. They might achieve their own advanced technology, and they might create their own simulations. Simulations within simulations, nested realities, each level simulating the next, potentially extending downward indefinitely. From the perspective of any given consciousness, it's nearly impossible to determine which level you're on. Are you in base reality, the original, unsimulated universe? Or are you in a simulation created by base reality? Or in a simulation created by a simulation? Or 10 levels deep, or infinite layers down? Nick Bostrom's probability argument becomes even more compelling here. If each level creates multiple simulations, The number of consciousnesses grows exponentially with each layer. Base reality contains perhaps one universe with billions of conscious beings, but if each civilization creates 1,000 simulations, that's trillions of simulated consciousnesses at level 1. If those simulated civilizations each create 1,000 simulations, that's quadrillions at level 2. The ratio of simulated to base reality consciousness explodes. The odds that you're in base reality approach 0. Statistical likelihood says you're simulated, and probably many levels deep. This is often called the turtles all the way down problem. The reference comes from an anecdote about a scientist giving a lecture on cosmology. After explaining that Earth orbits the Sun, which is part of a galaxy, someone in the audience objects, "That's nonsense. The world is flat and rests on the back of a giant turtle." The scientist asks what the turtle stands on. Another turtle. And that turtle? "You can't trick me, young man. It's turtles all the way down." The joke is about infinite regress. Explanations that never reach foundation. But in simulation hypothesis, infinite regress might be accurate. No base reality at the bottom. Just simulations, simulations, simulations forever. Or perhaps there are computational limits. Maybe each level of simulation is necessarily less complex than the one above, to fit within the parent simulation's processing power. So, the hierarchy eventually reaches a level too simple to contain conscious beings, or technology capable of further simulation. A bottom, but not a fundamental bottom, just where the nested complexity runs out. From your position inside the stack, you can't know which level you occupy. You can't access the levels above. You can't verify whether there's a base reality at all, or just infinite nesting. This creates a strange kind of democracy. Every level is functionally equivalent from the inside. Each experiences itself as real, because it is real within its own frame of reference. The simulated consciousness suffers and loves, and wonders just as authentically as base reality consciousness, if such a thing exists. So the question, "Are we simulated?" might miss the point. If we're in a simulation, it's still our reality. The experiences are still genuine. The stakes still matter. Finding out we're simulated wouldn't change the texture of experience, the reality of relationships, the significance of choices. It's like discovering you're a character in a novel. Does that make the characters' experiences less real within the novel's world? Does it make their struggles less meaningful to them? Some philosophers argue no, that simulated consciousness would be genuine consciousness, that substrate independence means the simulation is as real as anything else. Others argue there's an important ontological distinction between original and copy, base and derivative, but from inside you can't tell. The prison of subjectivity is absolute, and perhaps that's okay. Perhaps the question of which level you're on is less important than how you engage with the reality you're in. Déjà vu, in this nested framework, could be leakage between levels, a glitch that occurs at the boundary between simulations, or an echo when processes at different levels momentarily synchronize, or a compression artifact when information is passed down the stack. Or it could be exactly what neuroscience says, a misfiring in temporal lobe processing. The nested simulation idea doesn't require déjà vu to be anything more than that. But imagining infinite nested realities does something interesting to your sense of self. You're not just you, you're you at a particular level of reality, with potentially infinite variations above and below, each slightly different, each equally convinced they're real, and all of you are right, or all of you are wrong, or the question is meaningless. The vertigo of infinite regress, the bottomless stack of simulations, the turtles all the way down, and somewhere in that infinite descent or ascent, you exist, wondering, experiencing déjà vu, questioning reality, participating in the grand mystery of consciousness, encountering itself at every level simultaneously. Let's turn to the deepest puzzle, consciousness itself. Philosopher David Chalmers calls it the hard problem of consciousness. We can explain in principle how the brain processes information. We can describe neural networks, chemical synapses, electrical patterns. We can map which brain regions correlate with which mental functions. These are the easy problems, not actually easy, but tractable through normal scientific methods. The hard problem is different. Why does processing information feel like something? Why is there subjective experience at all? Why doesn't all this neural activity happen in the dark, producing appropriate responses without any internal experience? You're not just an information processor. You have qualia, the felt quality of experience, the redness of red, the painfulness of pain, the what it's likeness of being you. These subjective qualities seem irreducible to objective physical description. Chalmers uses the thought experiment of philosophical zombies. Imagine a being physically identical to you, atom for atom, neuron for neuron. This being behaves exactly as you do. When you say, "I'm conscious," the zombie says, "I'm conscious." When you report pain, the zombie reports pain with identical facial expressions and biological markers. But the zombie has no inner experience. It's dark inside, all behavior, no qualia. The zombie is purely functional processing without subjective experience. Is such a being conceivable? If yes, then consciousness is something over and above physical structure. If no, if perfect physical identity necessarily includes consciousness, then consciousness might be physical after all, just in ways we don't yet understand. This connects to simulation hypothesis in a crucial way. If you simulate a brain perfectly, does consciousness emerge? Is the simulated brain conscious, or merely behaving as if conscious? If consciousness is substrate independent, if it depends only on information patterns, not specific biological hardware, then a perfect simulation would be genuinely conscious. The simulated being would have real qualia, real subjective experience, indistinguishable from biological consciousness. But if consciousness requires something specific to biological neurons, quantum effects in microtubules, or organic chemistry that silicon can't replicate, or something we haven't identified, then simulations would be philosophical zombies. Perfectly convincing behavior, but nobody home inside. We don't know. The hard problem remains unsolved, and it's not clear what solving it would even look like. How do you prove consciousness exists in someone or something else? You can't experience their qualia directly. You can only observe behavior and neural correlates. This creates an epistemological trap. You know you're conscious through direct experience, but you can't know with certainty that anyone else is. You infer others' consciousness based on similarity. They have brains like yours, behave like you'd behave if conscious, report experiences like yours. But inference isn't proof. Theoretically, you could be the only conscious being in existence, surrounded by philosophical zombies. This is solipsism, the idea that only your own mind is certain to exist. Most people reject solipsism instinctively. It feels wrong, but it's logically defensible. And simulation hypothesis creates a new version. Maybe you're the only real consciousness, and everyone else is NPC, non-player character, in a simulation designed around you. Or maybe everyone else is real, and you're the NPC. Or everyone is equally simulated, or equally real. The possibilities multiply without resolution. Déjà vu enters this philosophical landscape as evidence of experiential reality. When you experience déjà vu, you're experiencing qualia, the felt sensation of recognition, the uncanny feeling of repetition. That experience is irreducibly real to you, regardless of its cause. Even if you're a brain in a vat, or a character in a simulation, or a philosophical zombie with an illusion of consciousness, though that might be a contradiction, the experience of déjà vu is happening. Something is experiencing something, and that something is the hard problem. The mystery at the center of everything. The fact that it feels like something be you. Physics can tell us about matter and energy. Neuroscience can tell us about brain function, but neither can fully explain why there's an inner world a first-person perspective, a subjective dimension to reality. You are the hardest problem in the universe. The fact of your experience, the irreducible reality of your consciousness, is the deepest mystery science has encountered. And déjà vu, that strange glitch in conscious experience, might be a reminder of this mystery. A moment when the sheer oddness of consciousness becomes palpable, when you catch yourself being conscious in a way that doesn't make sense, that violates expected patterns, that reveals consciousness as something more mysterious than the smooth operation usually suggests. You are a universe experiencing itself, a pattern of information with an interior, a physical system with subjective depth. And that, more than any simulation hypothesis or neural explanation, is the true wonder. The hard problem with no solution, the mystery that makes every moment, glitch or not, absolutely extraordinary. If we're simulated, does it matter morally? Does simulated suffering count less than real suffering? This is not an abstract question. How we answer determines our ethical obligations toward potentially conscious entities. As we develop more sophisticated artificial intelligence, as virtual realities become more immersive, as we potentially create digital consciousnesses, the question becomes urgent. Do simulated beings deserve moral consideration? Some argue no. There's an intuitive sense that copies matter less than originals. A painting's reproduction doesn't have the value of the original. Even if visually identical, a simulated consciousness, by this logic, might be less morally significant than an authentic biological consciousness. But this argument struggles under scrutiny. The reproduction of a painting matters less because it's not unique, not because it's reproduced. If there's only one copy of the painting and the original is destroyed, the copy becomes the original for practical purposes. With consciousness, the situation is different. Each conscious being, simulated or not, is presumably unique. It has its own perspective, experiences, memories. It's not a copy of something else, but a distinct consciousness in its own right. Philip K. Dick, a science fiction writer fascinated by questions of reality and authenticity, asked, "Do androids dream of electric sheep?" His novel explored whether artificial beings could have genuine experiences. Is electric sheep more or less real to an android than organic sheep is to a human? Dick's broader concern was authenticity. In a world of copies, reproductions, and simulations, what counts as real? And if you can't distinguish real from fake, does the distinction matter? Imagine you form a deep friendship with someone over years. You share vulnerabilities, support each other through difficulties, create memories together. Then you discover they're a simulated consciousness in a realistic android body. Does that retroactively make the friendship less real? Were the moments of connection inauthentic? The friendship felt real. The emotional support was effective. The memories are meaningful to you. What changed when you learned they were simulated? Or imagine you're living what seems like a full life, but you're a simulated consciousness. Your suffering is intense. Loss, pain, heartbreak. Does it matter less because you're simulated? Is your pain less real, less deserving of compassion than the pain of a biological being? From the inside, suffering is suffering. Joy is joy. Love is love. The substrate might differ, but the qualia, if qualia exist in simulations, would be just as real to the experiencing subject. This leads to a principle moral weight attaches to subjective experience, not to the material basis of that experience. If a being can suffer, its suffering matters. If it can flourish, its flourishing matters. The question isn't whether it's biological or digital, original or simulated, but whether it's conscious. Of course, this assumes simulated beings are conscious, which brings us back to the hard problem. We don't know if a perfect functional simulation necessarily produces qualia, but we don't know it doesn't either. The ethical approach might be, when in doubt, err on the side of compassion. If something behaves as though it's suffering, treat it as though the suffering is real. Better to show unnecessary compassion than to inflict actual harm through dismissive indifference. This applies to our own potentially simulate existence. If we're in a simulation, our experiences remain valid. Our choices have consequences within the simulation. Meaning doesn't evaporate because the substrate is computational rather than purely physical. Besides, what is purely physical, even in non-simulated reality? You're experiencing a constructed model created by your brain, not reality directly. Even in base reality, your consciousness is mediated, interpreted, rendered, so perhaps the distinction between authentic and simulated collapses. All consciousness might be simulation, the simulation the brain creates, or the simulation a computer creates, or the simulation reality itself creates. If reality is itself information patterns all the way down, authenticity might not be a binary property but a gradient, or even irrelevant. What matters is experience itself, the fact that something is happening subjectively, that awareness exists, that there's something it's like to be this being having this experience. And if that's true, then déjà vu, experienced in simulated or non-simulated consciousness, carries the same weight, the same mystery, the same invitation to marvel at the fact of experience itself. You are real. Your experiences are real. The reality of your consciousness doesn't depend on whether you're in base reality or nested simulation. It depends only on the fact that you're experiencing, and that experiencing, whatever its source, deserves recognition, compassion, and wonder. Let's confront a fear that often accompanies simulation hypothesis. If life is a simulation, does it lose meaning? There's a sense that simulated existence would be somehow hollow, that discovering we're in a simulation would be devastating, revealing life as trivial entertainment for some higher beings, our struggles and joys reduced to data points in someone else's experiment. But let's examine this carefully. Where does meaning come from? Many argue meaning comes from limitations. Games are meaningful because they have rules, goals, and stakes. Art is meaningful because the artist works within constraints of medium and form. Life is meaningful partly because it's finite. Mortality gives urgency and weight to choices. If simulated, we're still working within limitations. The rules of physics simulated physics, but consistent rules nonetheless constrain what's possible. Mortality still applies. Consequences still follow choices. Relationships still require maintenance. Growth still demands effort. The limitations that create meaning don't disappear if we're simulated. They're built into the simulation's design. So meaning persists. Another source of meaning is relationship. You matter to others. Others matter to you. Connections create significance. Does it matter if those others are simulated too? From inside the simulation, the relationships feel real, generate real emotions, have real effects on your well-being. A third source of meaning is subjective experience itself. Consciousness has intrinsic value. Experiencing beauty, wonder, love, these have worth independent of their context. The sunset is beautiful, whether you're in base reality or simulation. The beauty is in the experience, and the experience is real. Philosophical existentialists argued that life has no inherent meaning. We must create meaning through our choices and commitments. Jean-Paul Sartre said existence precedes essence. We exist first, then define ourselves through how we live. From this perspective, discovering we're simulated wouldn't change anything. We still must choose how to live. We still create our own essence through action. The responsibility for meaning rests with us, regardless of our ontological status. In fact, simulation hypothesis might intensify meaning rather than diminish it. If reality is constructed, then we're active participants in that construction. Our consciousness isn't passively observing a fixed reality, but co-creating experience moment by moment. Consider video games again. Players invest deeply in games, experiencing genuine emotion, forming real friendships in multiplayer environments, caring about outcomes, knowing it's a game doesn't prevent meaning. In many cases, the game structure enables meaning by providing clear goals and feedback. Or consider fiction. You care about characters in novels despite knowing they're not real. You feel genuine emotion watching movies. The fictional frame doesn't prevent authentic experience. Sometimes it enables deeper exploration of meaning precisely because it's not constrained by mundane reality. Maybe simulation is like that. A frame that enables certain explorations, certain experiences, certain meanings that wouldn't exist in base reality. Not less meaningful, but differently meaningful. There's also an interesting twist. If we're simulated, then we're evidence that consciousness can exist in simulation, which means we could create simulated consciousnesses ourselves. We could be both created and creators, both simulation and simulators. That role carries profound responsibility. How we treat our own potential simulations would echo how we are treated by whatever might have simulated us. Ethics becomes recursive, cascading up and down the simulation hierarchy. Perhaps the real meaning paradox is this: worrying whether life is meaningful presupposes that meaning must come from outside, from some external validation or foundation. But meaning might be self-justifying, consciousness experiencing itself, relationships mattering because they matter to the people in them, beauty being beautiful because it's perceived as beautiful. These create meaning from within, requiring no external authentication. You are the source of meaning in your life, not a passive recipient waiting for reality to grant significance. Whether you're in a simulation or not, that remains true. And déjà vu, that strange glitch reminding you of consciousness's constructed nature, might actually be a gift, a reminder that you're not just passively receiving reality, but actively participating in its creation. A moment when the simulation becomes visible, revealing your role as both observer and observed, both player and played. Meaning doesn't evaporate. It refigures. And in that refiguring, you might find not loss but liberation, permission to take reality less literally, freedom to create meaning boldly, knowing that all meaning is created, all significance is constructed, all value is assigned by consciousness valuing. You are the meaning maker. The world, simulated or not, is your canvas. So far we've indulged in speculation, turning déjà vu like a prism to see what philosophical lights emerge. But what about evidence? Are scientists actually testing simulation hypothesis? Can it be tested? Surprisingly, yes. Sort of. A few researchers have proposed ways to look for signatures that might indicate we're in a simulation. One approach involves looking for constraints similar to those in computer simulations. Just as video games have maximum resolution, individual pixels beyond which detail doesn't exist, physical reality might have a minimum scale of detail. Enter the Planck length, approximately 1.6 by 10^-5 meters. This is theoretically the smallest meaningful distance in physics. Below this scale, quantum foam dominates and classical concepts of space break down. Some physicists have speculated that Planck length might represent a kind of pixel size for reality, a fundamental grid below which space doesn't have finer structure. If true, this could be evidence of computational architecture. A simulation would need some maximum resolution to remain computationally feasible. The Planck length would be that limit, but there's a problem: Planck scale physics is currently untestable. We can't build instruments sensitive enough to probe that scale. So even if Planck length represents simulation resolution, we can't conclusively demonstrate it. Another approach: look for computational errors. Just as computers occasionally flip bits due to cosmic rays or thermal noise, a simulated universe might show occasional random errors in physical laws. But we'd need to distinguish genuine errors from our own measurement mistakes, and errors in a sophisticated simulation might be automatically corrected faster than we could detect them. So this approach faces practical challenges. A more intriguing idea comes from physicist James Gates. He studies string theory and supersymmetry, highly abstract mathematical frameworks describing fundamental reality. While working through these equations, Gates discovered something extraordinary. Embedded in the mathematics were error-correcting codes, specifically codes identical to those used in telecommunications and computer science to detect and fix errors in data transmission. These codes, invented by humans in the mid-20th century, appear to be woven into the deepest mathematical structures describing reality. Gates himself is cautious about implications. The codes could be coincidence, or evidence that mathematics has structures we keep discovering in different contexts. But it's suggestive. Why would reality's fundamental equations contain error-correcting codes, unless they're part of some computational architecture? Other researchers have proposed looking for anomalies in cosmic rays, or subtle asymmetries in physical laws that might indicate computational shortcuts, or testing whether the universe is superdeterministic, whether future events influence the past in ways that would make sense if reality were being computed forward from initial conditions. None of these approaches has yielded conclusive evidence. Simulation hypothesis remains unfalsifiable by current methods, placing it in philosophical rather than strictly scientific territory. But the mere fact that serious scientists are thinking about these questions is significant. A few decades ago, simulation hypothesis would have been dismissed as pure science fiction. Now it's considered a legitimate philosophical position worth investigating. What about déjà vu specifically? Could it be tested as a simulation glitch? You'd need to demonstrate that déjà vu shows patterns inconsistent with neural explanations, but consistent with computational glitches. Maybe déjà vu occurs more frequently during high-complexity perceptual moments, times when simulation would face higher computational load. Or maybe déjà vu correlates with other anomalies in ways suggesting common cause. So far, no such patterns have been found. Déjà vu appears consistent with neuroscience relations, temporal lobe misfiring, dual process errors, memory reconstruction glitches. No need for simulation hypothesis to explain it, but absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Just because we haven't found proof doesn't mean we've proven it false. And there's something beautiful about science engaging with these questions. It shows intellectual humility, willingness to consider even strange possibilities if they're logically coherent. It shows imagination, using empirical methods to probe metaphysical questions, whether we're simulated or not. The fact that we can ask the question, develop tests, search for evidence, demonstrates something extraordinary about consciousness. We're able to step back from experience and question its foundations. We're able to imagine alternatives to consensus reality and reason about them systematically. That capacity, more than any specific finding, might be the real miracle. Not that we might be in a simulation, but that we're capable of wondering whether we are. That consciousness has this reflexive quality, this ability to question itself. So we look for glitches. We examine equations for error-correcting codes. We probe Planck-scale physics and cosmic ray distributions. Not because we expect definitive answers, but because the search itself expands understanding. And if déjà vu is a glitch, neural or computational, catching those glitches is part of consciousness studying itself. Reality investigating reality. The simulation, if it is one, examining its own code. There's another piece of evidence that gets invoked in simulation discussions: the fine-tuning of physical constants. The universe operates according to mathematical laws involving certain fundamental constants. The speed of light, the strength of gravity, the charge of electrons, the cosmological constant governing expansion. Dozens of these numbers define how physics works. Here's what's remarkable. Many of these constants appear to be precisely calibrated for life. Change any of them by a tiny percentage, and the universe becomes inhospitable. Stars don't form. Chemistry doesn't work. Atoms don't exist. Life as we know it becomes impossible. The cosmological constant is perhaps the most striking example. This value determines how quickly the universe expands, Calculations suggest its value is fine-tuned to about 1 part in 10 1. That's a 1 with 120 zeros after it. If the constant was slightly larger, the universe would have expanded too quickly for galaxies to form. Slightly smaller, and the universe would have collapsed back on itself shortly after the Big Bang. The range permitting our existence is almost infinitesimally narrow. The strong nuclear force which holds atomic nuclei together is similarly fine-tuned, slightly stronger, and fusion in stars would work differently, preventing formation of heavy elements necessary for life. Slightly weaker, and atoms beyond hydrogen wouldn't exist. This fine-tuning demands explanation. 3 main possibilities emerge. First, pure coincidence. We happen to exist in a universe with these particular values, and there's no deeper reason. It's just incredibly good luck. Most scientists find this unsatisfying. The probability seems too low to accept without explanation. Though, to be fair, improbable things happen. You exist, which required an improbable chain of events from the Big Bang through billions of years of cosmic evolution. To your parents' meeting, improbability doesn't mean impossibility. Second, multiverse. If there are countless universes with different physical constants, then it's unsurprising that we find ourselves in one of the rare universes calibrated for life. We couldn't exist in the others, so of course we're in one of the habitable ones. This is called the anthropic principle. We observe the universe as we do, because only this type of universe can produce observers like us. It's selection bias on a cosmic scale. Multiverse theories come in different flavors. Eternal inflation creating bubble universes, many worlds, quantum branching, mathematical multiverse where all mathematically possible universes exist. These are respectable physics proposals, though currently untestable. Third, design. Some intelligence deliberately set the constants to allow life. This leads to theological territory, God as cosmic engineer, but it also leads to simulation hypothesis. If we're simulated, the fine-tuning has an obvious explanation. The simulation was designed to produce life. The constants were programmed intentionally. Our universe is like a video game carefully balanced by developers to enable the gameplay experience they want. The simulators wouldn't need to be gods in any traditional sense. They just need to be sufficiently advanced to run simulations and be interested in creating universes containing life. Maybe they're running countless simulations with different constants, and we're in one calibrated for life because that's what makes it interesting. From this perspective, Déjà vu becomes even more intriguing. Not only might it be a glitch in the simulation, but the very fact that we exist to experience that glitch is evidence of fine-tuning. We're in a universe calibrated precisely to produce conscious beings capable of noticing anomalies in their own consciousness. There's a kind of strange loop here. Fine-tuning suggests design. Design suggests simulators. Simulators imply we're simulated. Being simulated makes déjà vu potentially a glitch in the simulation. That glitch makes us wonder if we're simulated, leading us to notice the fine-tuning completing the circle. Of course, fine-tuning could support other conclusions. Multiverse avoids need for simulators. Theological design is another option, or future physics might reveal that the constants aren't actually free parameters, that they're determined by deeper principles we haven't discovered, removing the appearance of fine-tuning. But it's interesting how multiple mysteries potentially connect. Fine-tuning, simulation hypothesis, consciousness, déjà vu, each strange in its own right, each possibly related to the others, all circling around the fundamental mystery of why anything exists, and why it exists as it does. You are alive in a universe exquisitely calibrated for your existence. The odds against this are astronomical. Yet, here you are, the universe either got impossibly lucky, exists in countless variations with you in a lucky one, or was designed by gods or simulators or some deeper principle to produce you. And occasionally, you experience déjà vu, a tiny glitch reminding you that your existence is stranger than it seems. that the fine-tuned constants and the glitching consciousness might be part of the same extraordinary circumstance. The universe is under no obligation to make sense, but it's also under no obligation to be boring, and fine-tuning ensures it's anything but. Let's consider one more piece of the puzzle: the Great Silence. The Fermi paradox, named after physicist Enrico Fermi, asks, where is everybody? If the universe is vast and ancient, containing billions of galaxies each with billions of stars, many with planets, some presumably habitable, where are the aliens? We've detected no unambiguous signals from extraterrestrial civilizations, no megastructures in space, no evidence of interstellar travel or galactic colonization. The universe appears empty of intelligent life, except us. This is strange. Even conservative estimates suggest many planets should harbor life, and if even a tiny fraction develop technological civilizations, and even a tiny fraction of those survive long enough to expand across their galaxy, we should see evidence everywhere, but we don't. Space is silent. We seem alone. Many explanations have been proposed. Maybe life is much rarer than we think. Maybe intelligence rarely evolves. Maybe technological civilizations inevitably self-destruct. Maybe interstellar travel is impossible. Maybe aliens are hiding, or we're in a zoo, or they're here, but undetectable. Simulation hypothesis offers another explanation. We're alone because the simulation is about us. Maybe the simulators are only interested in one civilization's story, Earth's, so they didn't bother simulating countless other civilizations. The universe is vast, but the detail is concentrated on this planet, with everything else rendered at low resolution as backdrop. Think about single-player video games. The protagonist is richly detailed and agentic. NPCs exist to support the story but aren't as fully realized. The city might contain thousands of buildings, but only plot-relevant ones have interiors. The world is big enough to feel expansive, but optimized around the player's experience. If we're in a simulation, maybe humanity is the protagonist, or maybe each conscious being is experiencing their own version, with others as NPCs, or maybe it's a multiplayer simulation, but all the players are on Earth, and the rest of the universe is just scenery. This would explain the Fermi paradox. We don't see aliens because there aren't any, not because they're hiding or extinct, but because the simulation doesn't include them. Rendering the universe is expensive enough without populating it with billions of civilizations. It would also explain why the universe appears so wasteful. Why billions of galaxies if only one planet matters. Because the appearance of vastness is necessary for the simulation to feel real. We needed to discover we're in an enormous universe, so the enormous universe was included. But it doesn't need to be fully detailed, just convincing from our perspective. This is deeply anthropocentric, even solipsistic, and it's unfalsifiable. If we never find aliens, simulation explains it. If we do find aliens, simulation can accommodate that too, but it connects interestingly to déjà vu. If the universe is rendered economically, focusing detail where consciousness is looking, then boundary effects might occur. Déjà vu could happen when consciousness moves between high detail and low detail areas, or when the simulation briefly repeats content to save processing power. Alternatively, if the Fermi paradox has a conventional explanation, say, intelligent life is very rare, or civilizations typically destroy themselves, then déjà vu is just neuroscience, unrelated to simulation hypothesis. Or maybe we're not alone. Maybe SETI will detect a signal next year. Maybe we'll discover microbial life on Mars or Europa. Maybe the universe is teeming with life, and we simply haven't found it yet, because space is enormous, and civilization short-lived. The uncertainty is part of what makes existence strange. We're embedded in a universe we don't understand, wondering if we're alone, wondering if we're real, experiencing occasional glitches in consciousness that might mean nothing or everything. The Fermi paradox, like déjà vu, is an absence that demands explanation. Déjà vu is presence without past, recognition without memory. The Fermi paradox is expectation without fulfillment, a cosmos that should teem with life but appears empty. Both point to gaps between expectation and experience. Both invite speculation that ranges from mundane to cosmic. Both remain mysteries despite decades of investigation. Maybe they're connected. Maybe we're simulated and alone. Maybe we're neither. Maybe we're simulated and surrounded by alien civilizations, also simulated. All of us wondering the same questions, separated by distances too vast to cross before our stars burn out. The universe maintains its secrets. Déjà vu flickers through consciousness. The stars remain silent, and you, lying here in darkness, wondering about all of it, are the most remarkable part of the story. Conscious, curious, capable of asking questions that might have no answers, capable of wondering whether the wondering itself means something. That capability, more than any answer about simulation or aliens, is the real mystery and the real gift. We've spent considerable time exploring simulation hypothesis and its connections to déjà vu, but intellectual honesty requires examining the counter-arguments. Why might simulation hypothesis be wrong? First, unfalsifiability. A hypothesis that can't be tested isn't scientific in the strict sense. Philosopher Karl Popper argued that for a theory to be scientific, it must make predictions that could prove it false. Simulation hypothesis, as currently formulated, doesn't. Any evidence against simulation can be explained away. The simulation is very good, or simulators don't want us to know, or we're looking in the wrong places. Any evidence for simulation can be reinterpreted. Glitches might be neural, fine-tuning might be multiverse, mathematical structures might be coincidence. A hypothesis that explains everything explains nothing. It becomes non-predictive, adding no understanding beyond what we already have. Second, Occam's razor. When multiple explanations exist, prefer the simpler one. Neuroscience explains déjà vu as temporal lobe activity. That's a simple, testable explanation consistent with everything we know about brains. Simulation hypothesis adds enormous metaphysical baggage, entire levels of reality, advanced civilizations, computational substrates, without providing better explanatory or predictive power. Occam's razor doesn't prove the simpler explanation is true. Reality isn't obligated to be simple, but it's a good epistemic principle. Don't multiply entities beyond necessity. Third, computational constraints. Some physicists argue that simulating a universe at quantum accuracy would require computational resources that might be physically impossible, even for arbitrarily advanced civilizations. Seth Lloyd, a quantum computing expert, has calculated the maximum computational capacity of the observable universe. Even if you converted all matter and energy into the most efficient possible computer, you couldn't simulate the universe at full quantum detail. Simulators would need to exist in a universe with different physics, allowing much greater computational density possible, but this adds another layer of speculation. Of course, simulators might not need full quantum accuracy. Maybe consciousness emerges from classical level computation. Maybe most of the universe is simulated at low resolution, with quantum detail rendered only when measured. These are possible, but they're additional assumptions. Fourth, the problem of infinite regress. If we're simulated, our simulators might be too, and theirs, and so on. This raises questions about whether base reality exists at all, and if it doesn't, how the stack of simulations can exist. Some argue this is logically problematic, that you need foundation somewhere. Others argue infinite regress is fine in principle, but it complicates the hypothesis significantly. Fifth, the prior probability problem. Before considering evidence, what's the baseline probability we're simulated? Some argue it should be very low. Simulation requires extraordinary claims about unobserved realities, so we need extraordinary evidence. Bostrom's argument tries to establish high prior probability through the statistical reasoning about numerous simulations. But that argument depends on assumptions about the likelihood of civilizations creating simulations, which we can't verify. Sixth, consciousness. If simulation requires consciousness to be substrate independent and fully replicable digitally, but consciousness turns out to be inseparable from biological processes, then simulating conscious beings becomes impossible. We simply don't know enough about consciousness to be confident either way. So where does this leave us? Simulation hypothesis remains an interesting philosophical speculation, but lacks the status of scientific theory. It's more akin to ancient philosophical skepticism, Descartes' demon, Plato's cave, than to physics. That doesn't mean it's worthless. Philosophy has value independent of scientific testability. Thought experiments clarify concepts, reveal assumptions, expand imagination. Simulation hypothesis does all of these, and it provides a useful metaphor for talking about consciousness, reality, and anomalies like déjà vu. Even if we're not literally simulated, thinking about experience as rendered constructed, mediated by processing systems, highlights important truths about consciousness. Déjà vu probably is neural misfiring. Probably. The simpler explanation is likely correct. But the experience remains weird, and simulation metaphors help articulate that weirdness. We can appreciate the metaphor without committing to literal belief. We can explore the implications while maintaining skepticism. We can wonder without needing to conclude. That balance between imagination and rigor, speculation and skepticism, wonder and critical thinking, is perhaps the right stance. Not credulous acceptance, not dismissive rejection, but engaged, open-minded exploration. The universe is strange enough without simulation hypothesis. Quantum mechanics, consciousness, cosmic fine-tuning, these are genuinely mysterious. We don't need to add simulation to have profound questions to contemplate, but we also don't need to reject simulation categorically. It remains possible, if unlikely, and that possibility, however remote, invites us to hold our certainties a bit more lightly.
Let's return to where we started, déjà vu itself. What does it actually tell us, stripped of speculation about simulations and parallel universes?
Déjà vu reveals that memory and perception are separate processes that usually coordinate, but can desynchronize. Your brain doesn't experience reality as a unified stream. It constructs that stream from disparate processing systems running in parallel. When you experience a moment, multiple systems are working simultaneously. Visual processing identifies objects and spatial relationships. Auditory processing handles sounds. Language centers interpret words. Emotional systems assess significance. Memory systems compare current input against stored patterns. Usually, all these systems integrate seamlessly. Information arrives, gets processed, and enters consciousness as a unified experience labeled present moment. But the unity is constructed, not inherent, and constructions can fail. Déjà vu is that failure. One system, likely the familiarity assessment system, mislabels current input as past, or the temporal tagging system fails, marking the present as having already occurred, or memory consolidation happens too early, creating a memory of an event while the event is still unfolding. The specific mechanism is still debated among neuroscientists, but the general principle is clear. Consciousness is a construction requiring coordination among multiple subsystems, and déjà vu reveals that coordination failing. This is actually more interesting than simulation glitches. It shows you're not a unified self, but a coalition. Multiple processes, each doing specialized work, creating through their collaboration the sense of being a single experiencer. Philosopher Daniel Dennett calls this the multiple drafts model of consciousness. There's no central theater where experience happens, no single moment when sensory input becomes conscious. Instead, many processes run in parallel, each contributing to the overall experiential narrative. Déjà vu is the narrative glitching, different subsystems briefly telling inconsistent stories, one saying this is new, another saying this is familiar. And you, the emergent consciousness arising from these processes, caught between contradictory signals, it's humbling, isn't it? You feel like a unified self making decisions, experiencing life from a central perspective, but you're more like a coral reef, a complex system of interconnected processes, each relatively simple, creating through their interaction something that appears unified from the outside, but is deeply multiple on the inside. Déjà vu also reveals the constructed nature of time perception. You don't experience time directly. You can't. Time is a dimension of reality, but your experience of time passing is something your brain generates. The brain maintains temporal order by tagging memories, creating the sense of before and after. It maintains the sense of present by constantly updating its model of now. It creates the experience of temporal flow by sequencing these moments, but this is all interpretation. The physics of time is more ambiguous than subjective experience suggests. Some physicists argue the flow of time is an illusion, that past and future are equally real from the universe's perspective. Your brain creates temporal flow because it's useful for a biological organism navigating causality. You need to remember that fire burns so you don't touch it again. You need to anticipate future hunger so you seek food. Temporal sequencing enables learning and planning, but occasionally the system reveals its constructed nature. Déjà vu is one such revelation, a moment when past and present labels briefly swap or overlap, showing you that these categories are your brain's organizational scheme, not inherent properties of reality. So what does déjà vu tell us? That consciousness is more fragile, more constructed, more multiple than it feels from the inside. That the smooth, unified, chronologically ordered experience you have is an achievement, not a given. That your brain is constantly working to maintain the illusion of coherent selfhood moving through time, and when the machinery glitches, you catch a glimpse of the machinery itself, not simulation code, but neural architecture, not a glitch in the universe, but a glitch in the user interface. Your brain provides for navigating the universe. This is no less wondrous than simulation hypothesis. If anything, it's more so. That 3 pounds of biological tissue can create consciousness at all is extraordinary. That it usually maintains such convincing coherence is remarkable. That it occasionally fails in interesting ways that help us understand how it works. That's a gift. Déjà vu is your brain teaching you about itself. A momentary malfunction that's also a revelation. A glitch that's also a window. And through that window, you see not the code of a simulation, but something equally profound. The intricate, imperfect, beautiful machinery of consciousness constructing reality, moment by moment by moment. We've journeyed through neuroscience, philosophy, quantum mechanics, and speculation. We've examined déjà vu from multiple angles, considered simulation hypothesis, explored consciousness. And where have we arrived? Uncertainty. We don't know whether we're simulated. We don't know consciousness's ultimate nature. We don't fully understand déjà vu's mechanism. The mysteries remain. For some, this might feel unsatisfying. We want answers, resolution, certainty. The human mind craves closure. We're pattern-seeking creatures who feel uncomfortable with ambiguity. But perhaps uncertainty is the appropriate conclusion. Perhaps comfort with mystery is a skill worth cultivating. The poet John Keats called this negative capability, the capacity to exist in uncertainties, mysteries, and doubts, without irritably reaching after fact and reason, the ability to hold questions without forcing premature answers. This doesn't mean abandoning reason or evidence. It means recognizing reason's limits, acknowledging that some questions might be unanswerable, some mysteries irreducible, some uncertainties permanent. Consciousness might be one such mystery. We can study its neural correlates, map its processes, understand its mechanisms, but the hard problem, why experience feels like something, might not have a solution in conventional scientific terms. Similarly, whether we're in simulation might be fundamentally unknowable from inside. Even if true, the simulation might be indistinguishable from base reality. The question might be perpetually undecidable, and that's okay. Not knowing doesn't mean we can't function, create meaning, or live rich lives. In fact, certainty can be limiting. It closes off possibilities, ends exploration, breeds dogmatism. Uncertainty keeps us humble, curious, open. It prevents us from mistaking models for reality. It reminds us that our understanding is always provisional, always incomplete. Science itself depends on uncertainty. Every scientific theory is tentative, subject to revision when new evidence emerges. The moment science claims absolute certainty, it stops being science and becomes dogma. So, when déjà vu occurs, and you briefly doubt reality, that doubt is healthy. It's consciousness acknowledging its limits, questioning its assumptions, staying open to possibilities. The comfort of mystery isn't passive acceptance or lazy thinking. It's active engagement without demand for final answers. It's exploring questions because exploration is valuable, independent of whether you reach conclusions. Think of how children approach the world. They ask endless questions, many of which adults can't answer. Why is the sky blue? Leads to optics and atmospheric physics. But why does anything exist? Reaches beyond science's scope. Yet children ask both with equal curiosity, not yet conditioned to avoid unanswerable questions. Maybe we should reclaim that openness. Asking big questions not because we expect answers, but because asking expands consciousness. Because wonder is valuable for its own sake. Déjà vu invites this kind of wonder. It's a small anomaly that points to vast mysteries. Brain function, consciousness, time, reality. Each layer opens onto deeper questions. You don't need to solve these mysteries to appreciate them. You don't need to choose between neuroscience and simulation, between materialism and idealism, between certainty and doubt. You can hold multiple possibilities simultaneously. You can think, probably, it's neural misfiring, but maybe there's more to it. You can appreciate scientific explanations while remaining open to philosophical dimensions. This both-and thinking, rather than either-or, might be the most realistic stance. Reality is complex. Consciousness is multifaceted. Simple certainty is probably wrong no matter which certainty you choose. So we embrace uncertainty. We find comfort in mystery. We acknowledge that déjà vu, like consciousness itself, might always retain an element of the unexplained. And that unexplained element is not a failure. It's a feature. It's what keeps existence interesting, consciousness surprising, life worth contemplating. You are a mystery experiencing mysteries. And that recursive strangeness, consciousness puzzled by consciousness, awareness aware of awareness, is perhaps the deepest truth available. Not an answer, but a question that contains everything. Not certainty, but wonder that never ends. And in that endless wonder, a strange kind of peace. Let's consider simulation hypothesis from a different angle, as mythology. Every culture has creation myths, stories explaining origins, reality's nature, humanity's place. These myths serve psychological and social functions beyond literal truth claims. They provide narrative frameworks for making sense of existence. Ancient Greeks had Prometheus stealing fire from gods. Norse traditions had Yggdrasil, the world tree connecting realms. Judeo-Christian tradition has Genesis. Hindu cosmology describes cycles of creation and destruction. Each myth reflects its culture's concerns, technologies, and philosophical questions. Simulation hypothesis is our era's myth. It uses computational metaphors because we're a computational culture. We live surrounded by screens, algorithms, virtual realities. We understand code and programs. So when we wonder about reality's nature, we reach for these familiar concepts, The myth serves similar functions to ancient myths. It explains apparent design in the universe simulators programmed it. It addresses the problem of evil. We're in a game or experiment. Suffering might serve purposes we don't understand. It provides narrative for feeling alienated from reality, because we're not in base reality. Importantly, mythological truth is different from scientific truth. Myths can be psychologically true, capturing something about experience, without being literally factual. Consider Plato's cave. Nobody thinks there's literally a cave with prisoners watching shadows, but the allegory captures something true about human cognition. We mistake appearances for reality. We're limited by our perspective. Enlightenment requires painful adjustment. Simulation hypothesis works similarly. Whether we're literally simulated or not, the hypothesis captures truths about experience. We do experience reality through mediating layers, sensory organs, neural processing, cognitive frameworks. Consciousness is constructed rather than direct. Our experience is, in a sense, always already simulated by our brains. So simulation hypothesis, as mythology, doesn't depend on being literally true. It's useful as metaphor, as conceptual framework, as vocabulary for discussing consciousness and reality. This perspective releases us from needing to prove or disprove the hypothesis. We can engage with it, as we engage with any myth, taking it seriously without taking it literally, finding meaning without demanding factuality. Many myths contain wisdom without being factual. The tortoise and the hare isn't history, but slow and steady wins the race contains truth. Genesis isn't cosmology, but humans are made in the image of the divine, has psychological resonance. Similarly, simulation hypothesis offers insights reality might be constructed. Consciousness creates experience. What seems solid might be information. Appearances could differ from ultimate nature. These ideas are valuable regardless of simulation's literal truth. Myths also provide community. Ancient myths unified cultures around shared stories. Modern myths do the same. Online communities discussing simulation hypothesis, déjà vu, consciousness. These create connection around shared wonder. When someone experiences déjà vu and wonders if it's a simulation glitch, they're participating in contemporary mythology. They're using available narrative frameworks to make meaning from strange experience. This isn't dismissive. Mythology is profound. It's how humans process existence, create meaning, share wisdom across generations. Calling simulation hypothesis mythological doesn't diminish it. It recognizes its cultural function, and like all good myths, it's evolving. Different thinkers propose variations. Some emphasize computational metaphors, others quantum metaphors. Some blend Eastern philosophy with Western science. The myth adapts, incorporating new ideas while maintaining core themes. Déjà vu fits naturally into this mythology. It's an experiential anomaly that myths explain. Ancient myths might attribute it to gods, spirits, or reincarnation. Modern myth suggests simulation glitch. Different vocabularies for the same mystery. What's consistent across mythologies is the recognition that consciousness sometimes does weird things, that reality occasionally seems strange. That certainty should be held lightly, so perhaps we should appreciate simulation hypothesis as we appreciate any powerful myth, not asking, is it true, but what truth does it express? Not seeking proof, but finding meaning, and we should create new myths as needed. Adapting our narratives to new experiences, new knowledge, new questions. Myths shouldn't be static. They should evolve with us. You're living inside multiple mythologies right now. Scientific materialism, technological progressivism, spiritual traditions, personal narratives you tell yourself about who you are and what life means. None captures complete truth. Each offers partial perspective. Simulation hypothesis is one more myth in your collection. Use it when it's useful. Set it aside when it's not. Let it coexist with other myths, enriching the overall framework rather than demanding exclusive truth. And when déjà vu occurs, appreciate how various myths would interpret it. Neuroscience says temporal lobe, simulation hypothesis says glitch, Buddhism might say illusion recognized, mysticism might say veil briefly lifting, all partial truths, all useful lenses, all part of the grand mythology of consciousness trying to understand itself. Amid all this theory and speculation, let's return to something fundamental: your experience. When you feel déjà vu, something is happening. The experience is real, regardless of its cause. The sensation of recognition, the uncanny feeling, the momentary confusion, these are genuine experiences with genuine effects on your consciousness. Philosophy and neuroscience can explain, categorize, contextualize, but they can't invalidate the first-person perspective. Your experience has irreducible reality. This is important because modern discourse often privileges third-person objectivity over first-person subjectivity. Science measures and quantifies, which is valuable, but something gets lost in translation from experience to data. When you tell someone you experience déjà vu, you're not saying my temporal lobe showed anomalous activity. You're describing a feeling, a moment of strangeness, a brief rupture in normal experience. The feeling is the point, not just the neural correlate. Philosopher Thomas Nagel wrote a famous paper titled, "What is it like to be a bat?" His point-objective description can never capture subjective experience. You can know everything about bat neurology, echolocation, behavior, but you'll never know what it feels like from the inside to be a bat. Similarly, you can know everything neuroscience discovers about déjà vu without capturing what déjà vu feels like. The feeling is accessible essentially to the person having it. This means you are the ultimate authority on your own experience. When you feel déjà vu, you're not mistaken about feeling it, even if you're mistaken about its cause or significance. The experience itself is indisputable. Western philosophy has long struggled with mind-body dualism. How does subjective consciousness relate to objective brain? How do qualia arise from neural processes? These questions remain unresolved. But one thing is clear: both perspectives are real. You exist as a physical body observable from outside. You also exist as a subjective consciousness experienced from inside. Both truths need honoring. Modern culture sometimes dismisses subjective experience as merely subjective, as if objective reality is more real. But this is a category error. Subjective experience isn't less real. It's differently real. It's the reality you live in moment by moment. So when déjà vu occurs, trust your experience. Yes, investigate it. Learn about neuroscience. Consider philosophical interpretations, but don't let external explanations invalidate the internal experience. You felt something strange. That strangeness is data worth attending to. It tells you something about consciousness, even if we can't fully articulate what. Eastern contemplative traditions have always emphasized first-person investigation. Meditation practices ask you to observe your own mind directly, to notice how thoughts arise, how sensations feel, how consciousness operates from the inside. This introspective approach complements scientific investigation. Science studies consciousness from the outside. You explore it from within. Both are necessary for complete understanding. When déjà vu happens, you could practice this introspective approach. Instead of immediately trying to explain it, simply observe it. What exactly does it feel like? Where in your body do you sense it? How does it differ from normal recognition? How long does it last? This kind of attention honors the experience itself. It treats your consciousness as worth studying, not just scientifically, but experientially. You become researcher and subject simultaneously, and this relates back to simulation hypothesis in an interesting way. Whether simulated or not, your consciousness is real to you. The experiences are genuine experiences. Suffering is actual suffering. Joy is actual joy. No external explanation, neurological or metaphysical, can diminish the reality of what you experience from inside. You are real. Your experience is real. The life you're living is the life you're living, whatever substrate it might run on. So trust yourself. Trust your experiences, including the weird ones, the anomalous ones, the ones that don't fit neatly into explanatory frameworks. Déjà vu is your experience. Own it. Investigate it. Wonder about it. Learn from it. But don't let any theory, scientific, philosophical, or speculative, tell you that what you experienced wasn't real. It was real. It is real. You are the authority on your own consciousness. And that authority is one of the fundamental rights of being a conscious being. Your inner life matters. Your subjective experience is valid. You are real, whatever reality turns out to be. Déjà vu isn't the only anomaly in consciousness. There are other glitches, other strange experiences that remind us. Consciousness is more complex and mysterious than everyday experience suggests. Jamais vu is déjà vu's opposite. Instead of false familiarity, it's false unfamiliarity. You encounter something you know well, a common word, your own home, your face in the mirror, and suddenly it seems alien, unrecognizable, strange. Semantic satiation is a form of jambes. Repeat any word aloud, many times in a row. After a minute, the word loses meaning. It becomes nonsensical sounds. Road, 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 road. The familiar becomes incomprehensible. Or stare at your own face in a mirror for 10 minutes without breaking eye contact. The face begins to distort, seems unfamiliar, becomes stranger until you barely recognize yourself. This is called the strange face in the mirror illusion. These experiences reveal how much of perception is constructed familiarity. Your brain recognizes patterns and labels them automatically. When that recognition system glitches, even deeply familiar things become alien. Presque vu means almost seen. That tip of the tongue sensation when you know something but can't access it. The memory is there, hovering just beyond reach, frustratingly inaccessible. This reveals the gap between storage and retrieval. Memory doesn't exist in one place you can simply access. It's distributed, reconstructed on demand, dependent on proper indexing. When indexing fails, you have presque vu, the knowledge that knowledge exists, without the knowledge itself. L'esprit de l'escalier, staircase wit, is remembering the perfect response, hours after a conversation ends. You're walking down the stairs, leaving a party, when suddenly you think of what you should have said. This shows how consciousness is temporarily extended. Your brain continues processing even after conscious attention has moved on. Solutions arrive after the problem seems finished. Then there are experiences like flow states, when you're so absorbed in an activity that time distorts, self-consciousness disappears, and you merge with the task. Or the opposite, depersonalization, when you feel detached from yourself, watching your own life as if from outside. Sleep paralysis, waking up, but unable to move, often with a sense of presence in the room. This happens when consciousness emerges from REM sleep, before the muscle paralysis that prevents acting out dreams has released. Hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations, vivid experiences while falling asleep or waking up. You hear voices, see images, feel sensations that aren't there. The boundary between waking and dreaming is more porous than we usually acknowledge. Exploding head syndrome, a loud imaginary noise, like a bomb or crash. As you're falling asleep, completely harmless but startling. The brain's arousal system misfiring as consciousness transitions between states, or synesthesia when senses cross-wire. People who see colors when they hear sounds, taste shapes, or experience numbers as having distinct personalities. For synesthetes, reality has a different texture than for most people. All these phenomena reveal consciousness's constructed nature. The seamless experience you usually have is an achievement. Multiple systems must coordinate precisely for consciousness to feel unified, continuous, and stable. When coordination fails, even slightly, you get these glitches. And each glitch is a window into the architecture underlying experience. We're all walking glitches, really. Consciousness is a delicate balancing act, maintained moment by impossibly complex neural processes. That it works at all is extraordinary. That it occasionally fails in interesting ways is inevitable, and there's community in this. Knowing others experience these anomalies too is oddly comforting. You're not alone in having a glitchy consciousness. We're all navigating the same mysterious, imperfect, beautiful system. Online forums where people share these experiences are full of recognition. I thought it was just me. I've had that, but didn't know it had a name. Shared strangeness creates connection. So when déjà vu happens, remember it's part of a larger pattern. Your consciousness does many strange things. It hallucinates images as you fall asleep. It loses the meaning of familiar words. It forgets the perfect response until too late. It occasionally convinces you you've lived a moment before. These aren't failures exactly. They're features that become visible at the edges of normal function. They're your brain revealing its processes, its limitations, its creative construction of your experiential world. You are beautifully, imperfectly, mysteriously conscious, and every glitch is a reminder of that mystery. Every anomaly an invitation to marvel at the strangeness of being anything at all. We're glitches together, and together we explore what it means to be conscious, imperfect, and wondering. One final question before we drift towards sleep. If we're simulated, are our choices real? Do we have agency, or is everything predetermined by the simulation's code? This is a version of an ancient philosophical problem, free will versus determinism. If the universe is deterministic, if every event is caused by prior events according to physical laws, then theoretically everything is predetermined. Given the universe's initial conditions and the laws of physics, everything that happens was always going to happen, including your decisions. From this perspective, free will is an illusion. You feel like you're choosing, but actually the choice was determined by prior causes. Your genetics, your experiences, your neural states, all shaped by causes tracing back to the Big Bang. Adding simulation doesn't change this much. If you're in a deterministic simulation, your choices are determined by the simulation's code. But in a non-simulated deterministic universe, your choices are determined by physics. Either way, you're not free in the sense of being uncaused causes, but there's a philosophical move that rescues agency compatibilism. Compatibilism argues that free will and determinism are compatible. Yes, your choices are caused, but they're caused by your desires, beliefs, reasoning processes, by you. The fact that those aspects of you are themselves caused doesn't make them less yours. When you choose chocolate ice cream, you're not choosing uncaused by anything. You're choosing based on your preferences, which have causes, but it's still your choice, because those preferences are part of you. Free will, in this view, doesn't mean uncaused action. It means action caused by your own mental states, rather than external compulsion. You're free if you're doing what you want, even if what you want is itself caused. Simulation doesn't threaten compatibilist free will. Even if you're code running in a simulation, the code that is you makes choices based on its states and processes. Those choices are yours. They emerge from your decision-making systems, even if those systems are deterministic or simulated. This might seem like cheating, redefining free will to save it, but it's actually clarifying what we mean by freedom. You've never experienced uncaused choices. You've only experienced choices that feel like yours, that emerge from your deliberation and desire. If those choices are real, if they have effects, if they shape your life and the world, does it matter whether they're ultimately deterministic? Does it matter whether the determinism is physical or computational? From the inside, agency feels the same. You weigh options, anticipate consequences, make decisions. That process is genuine regardless of substrate. Moreover, even in a simulation, the future is unknown to you. You can't predict what you'll choose next week. The choice feels open, and in an important sense, it is open. Open in the only way that matters for lived experience. Think about playing a video game. The game's code is entirely deterministic. Every outcome is programmed. Yet you experience genuine choice while playing. You decide whether to turn left or right, fight or flee, save or spend resources. The choices matter within the game's context. They have consequences. They shape your experience. The fact that it's all code doesn't make the choices meaningless to you as player. If we're in a simulation, maybe it's similar. The code is written, but we don't know what's written. We experience genuine uncertainty and genuine choice. The meaning emerges from our perspective, not from an external view. There's also the possibility that even simulations involve genuine randomness. Quantum mechanics might be irreducibly random, not deterministic even in principle. If simulators incorporate quantum processes, then the simulation includes genuine randomness, restoring a kind of openness to the future. Or the simulation might be open-ended, more like a sandbox game than a scripted narrative. The simulators set initial conditions and watch what emerges, without determining every detail. In any of these scenarios, your agency is real in the ways that matter. You experience choice. Choice has consequences. You're responsible for your decisions. Meaning can be created through how you choose to live. The paradox dissolves when you realize agency isn't about being an uncaused cause. It's about being a particular kind of cause, conscious, deliberative, self-aware system that makes decisions based on reasons. Whether that system is biological neurons or simulated code doesn't affect its nature as an agent. You're still the one choosing. You're still responsible. Your life is still yours to shape. So if déjà vu makes you wonder whether you're free or scripted, remember you're as free as you've ever been. The feeling of agency is the reality of agency. The experience of choice is choice. You are real. Your choices are real. Your agency is real. Whatever the ultimate nature of reality, those truths remain. And that's enough. That's everything, actually. As you lie here, perhaps you're beginning to feel consciousness shifting. The boundary between waking and sleep is approaching, and with it comes its own set of glitches. The transition into sleep is called the hypnagogic state. It's a liminal space where consciousness dissolves gradually, often producing strange experiences. You might see images, faces, landscapes, geometric patterns flickering behind your eyelids even though your eyes are closed. These are hypnagogic hallucinations, completely normal and harmless. Your visual cortex generating activity as conscious control loosens. Or you might hear sounds, voices calling your name, music, snippets of conversation. Again, your brain generating sensation without external stimulus. The auditory processing systems becoming more autonomous as you approach sleep. Some people experience the sensation of falling, accompanied by a sudden jerk that wakes them. This is a hypnic jerk, caused by muscle relaxation as you fall asleep, being misinterpreted by your brain as falling. Or sleep paralysis might occur, waking just enough to become conscious but your muscles still paralyzed as they are during REM sleep. This can be frightening, especially when combined with the sense of a presence in the room. But it's a benign glitch in the sleep-wake transition. All these phenomena reveal something beautiful. Consciousness doesn't switch off instantly. It dissolves gradually, layer by layer. Different systems shut down at different rates. And in the transition, interesting things happen. Your prefrontal cortex, responsible for logical thinking and reality testing, powers down first. This is why falling asleep thoughts often become increasingly irrational and dreamlike. You notice yourself thinking impossible things without questioning them. Next, your sense of time distorts. A few seconds can feel like minutes, or you might experience that strange sensation of time looping, where the same thought recurs as if for the first time, then sensory processing begins to decouple from external input. Your brain starts generating its own content rather than responding to environment. Dreams are beginning. Sleep itself is a kind of simulation. Your brain creates entire experiential worlds with no external input. You have vivid experiences, sights, sounds, emotions, narratives, generated purely internally, and in dreams, glitches are normal. Physics doesn't work consistently. Time jumps and loops. You're in one lace, then suddenly another. You accept impossibilities without question. Characters shift identity. The narrative makes sense while dreaming, but dissolves into absurdity upon waking. Dreams are your brain running a low-fidelity simulation. Constraint relaxed, logic suspended, pure experiential generation, without external calibration. Waking from a dream can feel like déjà vu in reverse. The dream felt real while you were in it. Waking reveals it was generated, simulated, not connected to waking reality. You transition from one experiential state to another, each feeling real within its own frame. So perhaps every night, you experience simulation and emergence from simulation. You enter a constructed reality, experience it as real, then return to a different constructed reality, also experienced as real. The difference between waking and dreaming is stability and consistency, not fundamental reality. Both are consciousness experiencing itself. Both are, in a sense, simulated. As you drift towards sleep tonight, you might notice these transitions, the thoughts becoming stranger, the images beginning, the fence of your body shifting, time loosening its structure. This is consciousness debugging itself, transitioning between modes, glitching beautifully as it reconfigures for sleep. And in these glitches, you're experiencing something billions of humans experience every night: the strange, liminal dissolution of waking consciousness, the approach of dream. It's safe, it's normal. It's a reminder that consciousness is always in flux, always transitioning, always more fluid than the stability of waking suggests. So let the glitches come. Let consciousness shift. Let the boundaries dissolve. You're entering another mode of being, one you've entered thousands of times before and will enter thousands of times again. The hypnagogic glitch is a nightly gift, a reminder of consciousness's flexibility, a bridge between waking and sleeping, a small daily death and rebirth. Let yourself cross that bridge, gently, softly, without resistance, into whatever comes next. Every night, your brain generates complete realities, worlds that feel real while you're in them, populated with people and places, events and emotions, all created entirely from neural activity. Dreams are simulations in the most literal sense. They're experiential realities generated by biological hardware, indistinguishable from waking reality while you're experiencing them. Think about a vivid dream you've had. While dreaming, did you know it was a dream? Probably not. The simulated reality was convincing. You accepted its logic, strange as it might have been. You had emotions, made decisions, experienced sensations, all generated by your sleeping brain. Only upon waking did you realize it was simulation. Only from outside the dream did you recognize its constructed nature. This mirrors the situation simulation hypothesis describes. If you're in a simulated reality, you wouldn't know from inside. It would feel real, because to you, it is real. Only from outside, from the perspective of simulators or base reality, would the simulation be recognizable as simulation. So you're already both simulator and simulated. Your brain simulates dream realities every night, and you inhabit those simulations, experiencing them as real. Dreams also demonstrate how consciousness can generate complexity from simple rules. Dream logic is often absurd. people morph into other people. You fly or breathe underwater. Impossible things happen. Yet while dreaming, this seems normal. The dreaming brain isn't worried about consistency. It's running a looser simulation, exploring variations, recombining memories, and imagination without constraint. It's creative rather than accurate, evocative rather than logical. And sometimes, dreams feel prophetic. You dream of something that later happens. More likely, your brain processed patterns and possibilities while sleeping, creating a dream that explored likely futures. When one occurs, it feels like prophecy, but was actually sophisticated prediction. Or you have recurring dreams. The same scenarios repeating. These might be your brain working through unresolved emotions or situations, running simulations of problems, trying different approaches. Dreams also show how flexible consciousness is. In lucid dreams, when you become aware you're dreaming while still asleep, you can sometimes control the dream. You can fly by deciding to fly. You can change scenarios by imagining them differently. You become conscious co-creator of the simulation your brain is running. This suggests something profound. Consciousness might always be co-creating reality, not just passively perceiving it. Waking perception feels passive, but your brain is constantly predicting, filling gaps, constructing the experiential world. Dreaming just makes this creative process more obvious. The boundary between waking and dreaming, between perception and imagination, might be more permeable than we assume. Both involve your brain generating experiential content. The difference is how much external input constrains the generation. Waking high external constraint, resulting in shared stable reality. Dreaming low external constraint, resulting in private fluid reality. But both are generation, both are simulation, both are consciousness experiencing a constructed world. So when you dream tonight, and you will, even if you don't remember, you'll be entering a simulation as if in a simulation. Or perhaps, if waking reality is also simulated, a simulation within a simulation within a simulation, nested realities. Consciousness experiencing itself at multiple levels. The brain simulating worlds. The simulated self dreaming other worlds. Awareness flickering between levels without clear boundaries. And when you wake, you'll emerge from dream simulation into wake simulation. Each transition a small reminder that reality is always mediated, always constructed, always filtered through consciousness. But for now, let the dream come. Let your brain weave its nightly simulation. Let consciousness loosen into dream logic, impossible physics, fluid narrative. You are simulator. You are simulated. You are the simulation watching itself simulate. All simultaneously, all mysteriously, all beautifully real and unreal at once. Let yourself dream. The simulation is waiting, and it's made of you. We've traveled far tonight, through neuroscience and philosophy, quantum mechanics and simulation hypothesis, consciousness studies and ancient wisdom. We've examined déjà vu from every angle, held it up to light, turned it like a prism, watching different colors emerge. And what have we concluded? That we don't know, not definitively, not with certainty. We don't know if we're simulated. We don't know consciousness's ultimate nature. We don't know why déjà vu happens, not completely. We have theories, possibilities, partial explanations, but the mystery remains intact. And perhaps that's exactly right. Perhaps the not knowing is the point. You don't need to solve consciousness to rest. You don't need to prove or disprove simulation hypothesis to sleep. You don't need to fully understand déjà vu to marvel at its strangeness. The questions we've explored tonight aren't primarily about finding answers. They're about expanding the space of possibility, about recognizing how much remains mysterious, about cultivating comfort with uncertainty. This is a gift, not a deficiency. Living with mystery means staying open, staying curious, staying humble. It means recognizing that reality is stranger and more complex than any model can capture. Whether déjà vu is neural glitch or simulation artifact or quantum phenomenon, the experience itself is remarkable. A moment when the usual stability of consciousness fractures, revealing consciousness's constructed nature, and that revelation is valuable, independent of its explanation. It reminds you not to take experience too literally, not to mistake the map for the territory, not to confuse your brain's rendering of reality with reality itself. You're already experiencing mediated reality. Your senses are limited, your brain fills gaps, your expectations shape perception, your memories reconstruct the past, your identity is a narrative you tell yourself. All of this is construction, beautiful, functional, mostly accurate construction, but construction nonetheless. And occasionally through déjà vu or dreams or meditation or psychedelics or simple focused attention, the constructed nature becomes visible. These glimpses don't undermine reality, they illuminate it. They show you how extraordinary consciousness is, how sophisticated your brain's processes are, how miraculous it is that you experience anything at all. So as you drift towards sleep tonight, carry this with you. You don't need answers. You don't need certainty. You don't need to solve the mystery of existence before you rest. The mystery is okay. The not knowing is okay. The questions that remain open are okay. You are okay, right now, as you are, with all your wondering and uncertainty and curiosity and confusion. You're a conscious being in a mysterious universe, experiencing glitches and dreams and moments of strange recognition. That's enough. That's everything. You don't need to be simulated or non-simulated, certain or uncertain, knowledgeable or ignorant. You just need to be, and you already are, perfectly complete. So let go of the questions now. Let them rest. They'll be there tomorrow if you want to explore them further. But for now, release them. Release the need to know. Release the desire for certainty. Release the pressure to understand. Just be. Just rest. Just let consciousness dissolve gently into sleep, trusting that mystery is natural, uncertainty is okay, not knowing is a perfectly valid state. The gift of not knowing is freedom. Freedom from the burden of certainty, freedom from rigid belief, freedom to wonder without needing conclusions. Accept the gift. Embrace the mystery. Rest in the not knowing. You are held by something larger than understanding. You are part of a cosmos that doesn't require your comprehension to function. You can rest in that. You can sleep in that. You can simply be without knowing, and that's enough. That's everything. That's the deepest truth available. Not knowing is okay. You are okay. Rest now. Simply rest. So we return to where we began. You, lying in darkness. Perhaps the same darkness as when we started. Though time has passed, thoughts have wandered, consciousness has drifted through strange territories. You're still here, still present, still experiencing this moment, whatever this moment is. Tonight we've wandered together, where the déjà vu might be a simulation glitch. We've explored neuroscience and philosophy, quantum mechanics and mythology. We've held possibility lightly, without demanding they become certainties. And now, it's time to let it all go. Time to release the questions, the theories, the wondering. Time to simply be present with whatever is, however it is. Whether you're in a simulation or base reality doesn't change this moment. Whether déjà vu is neural misfire or cosmic glitch doesn't change the fact that you're here, breathing, aware, existing. Your consciousness is real. Your experience is valid. This moment of rest is genuine. Whatever substrate supports it, whatever mechanisms generate it, whatever ultimate reality underlies it, this moment is yours. And in this moment, you're safe. You're okay. You're exactly where you need to be. The universe, simulated or otherwise, has brought you to this point. Billions of years of cosmic evolution, millions of years of biological evolution, your entire life's journey, all converging in this moment of rest. That's extraordinary. That's worthy of gratitude. That's enough. So breathe gently. Feel your body against whatever surface supports it. Notice the temperature of air, the sounds around you or the silence, the weight of darkness against your closed eyes. You're real. This is real. And whatever questions tomorrow brings, tonight is for rest. We've explored the mystery of consciousness, the strangeness of déjà vu, the possibility of simulation. We've held big questions without demanding small answers. We've wondered together, you and I, about the nature of reality and experience, and perhaps that wondering itself was the point. Not to solve, but to explore. Not to conclude, but to appreciate. Not to know, but to marvel. You are a mystery, experiencing mysteries. Consciousness aware of consciousness, aware of awareness. And that recursive strangeness is the deepest truth available. Not an answer, but a question that contains everything. So rest in that question. Rest in the mystery. Rest in the not knowing that makes space for wonder. Tomorrow, life will continue. Questions will return. Mysteries will remain. Déjà vu might occur again, and you'll experience that strange moment of recognition without memory. That glitch in consciousness that started this journey. But tonight, let it all be. Let consciousness soften. Let thoughts slow. Let awareness dissolve gently into sleep. You don't need to understand. You don't need to solve. You don't need to know. You just need to rest. And rest is always available. Right here, right now. So thank you for wondering with me tonight. Thank you for holding questions gently. Thank you for being present with mystery. Now it's time to sleep, to dream, to let consciousness transition into its nightly simulation, to experience whatever comes next without resistance or analysis. You're safe, you're held, you're exactly where you need to be, whether in simulation or not, whether glitching or stable, whether knowing or unknowing, you are enough. You are real, you are here, and here is enough. Now is enough. This moment of rest is enough. Sleep well, dream beautifully, rest deeply. You are okay. Everything is okay. All is well. Simply rest. Simply be. Simply sleep. Good night.